Chapter 816. In the span of 3 months, all the people related to Zhang Xiaohua on the Shixin Peak had obtained unprecedented opportunities. They were all undergoing, or would definitely undergo, shocking changes in the future. What about Zhang Xiaohua, who was sitting on the top of the Shixin Peak and greedily looking at the sea of clouds? Speaking of which, Zhang Xiaohua had to admit that this guy was really tired. In these 3 months, he only concentrated on refining elixirs for the disciples of the Misty Mountain Villa. After refining dozens of cauldrons of meridian-soothing pills and bone-solidifying pills, he had become extremely proficient in the technique of refining elixirs and the control of true qi. His level of refining elixirs had also steadily increased. From the previous batch of 27 elixirs, it gradually increased to 36, 45, and even occasionally 54. This was not just a little bit better than the previous batch of 9 elixirs he could only refine previously. Just from the reduced cost alone, Zhang Xiaohua was full of joy. When Zhang Xiaohua was not refining elixirs, he would sit in front of the cauldron and comprehend the talismans. The rabbit talisman that he had comprehended at the beginning was finally comprehended by him to the last 9. It was not a small improvement. As for the flying technique that he obtained from the ethereal mountain, because Zhang Xiaohua had already practiced the imperial wind technique in the orchid evening refining, he could not help but begin to cultivate the flying technique that he had longed for a long time. However, this flying technique was not comparable to the imperial wind technique and the levitation technique. It was an authentic flying technique of the immortal Tao. How could it be cultivated by a kid who had just reached the middle stage of qi refining? After more than 10 times of comprehension, he actually could not comprehend even a little bit. Fortunately, Zhang Xiaohua saw a concealment technique used in flying in the appendix of the flying technique. Zhang Xiaohua could understand this concealment technique, which slightly comforted Zhang Xiaohua's battered heart. Cultivators of the immortal Tao flew in the air. Some were like meteors streaking across the sky. Some were like floating leaves. Some were like leisurely strolling in the courtyard, and some did not want others to see their whereabouts. It was as if they were hiding in the air and flying quickly. This concealment technique was precisely the method to cultivate this kind of flight. However, even if it was an auxiliary Dharma spell for the flying spell, Zhang Xiaohua still did not succeed after practicing it for a long time. Thus, in her frustration, she went to the top of the mountain and looked at the tumbling sea of clouds. However, in her heart, she was thinking about her own way of karma. The way of karma was the ultimate truth of heaven and earth under the way of heaven. As early as Zhang Xiaohua came back from the Valley Orchid Evening refinement, he had comprehended it on Tianmu Peak. 3 months ago, he had comprehended the vague outline of it on Shixin Peak. During these 3 months, whenever Zhang Xiaohua had free time, he would comprehend the way of karma, which actually allowed him to touch the details. While Zhang Xiaohua was comprehending the way of karma, she suddenly felt something. She immediately made an incantation and went straight to the small courtyard of the Pill Expansion Hall. When she returned to the small courtyard and released her divine sense, she saw Du Feng standing in front of the door and knocking again. This was the result of Zhang Xiaohua's comprehension of the way of karma. Although Zhang Xiaohua could vaguely feel that there would be something there, she did not know the specific location and what it would be. Of course, the only place in Shixin Peak that could find him was the small courtyard of the Pill Expansion Hall. How could there be any other place? This was also the reason why she came directly. This kind of person who could clearly sense the location of the way of karma was someone that Zhang Xiaohua had to look up to. Zhang Xiaohua looked at the door with a smile and asked, "Senior Brother Du, what wind blew you here again? Is it time for our 2 families to trade again?" Du Feng smiled and shook his head. "Junior Brotherin is joking. How can it be so fast? My Shixin Peak's medicinal herbs are not ripe yet. What can I use to trade with you?" Then he smiled and said, "Junior Brotherin, you seem to be quite free recently. Are you tired of Shixin Peak?" Zhang Xiaohua asked curiously, "Senior Brother Du, what do you mean?" Du Feng touched his nose and said, I remember when junior brother Rin first came to Shishing Peak. I knocked on the door 10 times. It was not easy for junior brother Rin to be there once. Now, I knocked on the door 10 times, and junior brother Rin was there all 10 times. He just stayed in the small courtyard and did not go anywhere. If he was not tired of Shishing Peak, what else could it be? Zhang Xiaohua was taken aback for a moment before bursting into laughter. Senior brother, Du has a keen eye. You're right. I don't have anywhere to go. Well, that's right. I have an interesting matter here, and I want to invite junior brother Rin to participate. Zhang Xiaohua saw that Du Feng was being mysterious and asked curiously, Senior brother Du, don't scare me. What interesting matter can there be in Shishing Peak? Hearing this, Du Feng took out an invitation card and handed it over. When my Misty school was in Misty Peak, there was a martial arts exhibition every year. Now that we are at Shishing Peak, this tradition has not been forgotten. There is a martial arts exhibition every year, and it will be held in a few days this year. This is the invitation card. Martial arts exhibition? Hearing these words, Zhang Xiaohua's face became very interesting. Speaking of other things in Misty School, Zhang Xiaohua might not know or have forgotten, but there were 2 things that he would never forget. One was the library of Misty School. It was in the library that he accidentally took a book of Carefree Heart Sutra. That was why he had the opportunity to walk on the way of immortality and embark on a cultivation path that was completely different from Zhang Xiaohu's. If there was no library, Zhang Xiaohua estimated that at this time he would still be in Huanxi Mountain Villa under the control of the Righteous Alliance and be humiliated by Brother Ma. The other thing was the martial arts exhibition. It was the martial arts exhibition that allowed Zhang Xiaohua to show his talent and officially start his journey in Jianghu. The martial arts exhibition of Misty School was also the first time that Zhang Xiaohua seriously compared notes with others. He relied on his own martial arts and stumbled his way into the final battle of the Second Order of the Cloth Clothes. He even won against the genius disciple of the Dalan Temple, who came from afar to challenge him in the arena. Therefore, when he heard Du Feng talk about the martial arts exhibition, how could he not be moved? He even thought of Mu Tangchun, who ran around in the elixir trade. He was Zhang Xiaohua's strong opponent in the martial arts exhibition that day. Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua was in a daze, Du Feng whispered, Junior brother Rin? Why? Have you heard of the martial arts exhibition of Misty Hall? Oh, Zhang Xiaohua came back to his senses and said, that's right. When we were in the Yulan Grand Canyon, we were surrounded by terrifying dangers. In order to make us feel at ease, Senior brother Zhang told us a lot of interesting stories about his time in the ethereal sect. Among them were the scenes of the martial arts exhibition when you were in the ethereal peak. Alas, Du Feng sighed and said, times have changed. The martial arts exhibition of today is different from the past. Really? Zhang Xiaohua was also surprised. He looked around and asked, what's different about it? If it's convenient for Senior brother Du, you can tell me about it. I'm very curious. What's inconvenient about it? Du Feng sneered, it's just the truth. You'll know in a few days when you participate. Then he licked his lips and said, during this time, I see that junior brother Rin is also a sentimental person. He doesn't discriminate against the disciples of Misty Hall because we are outsiders. There's no harm in talking to you. Zhang Xiaohua cupped his hands and said, Senior brother Du's way of thinking is very useful to me. You really think too highly of me. Du Feng didn't care about Zhang Xiaohua's modesty and said, since the disciples of Misty School came to the incense cult, all the martial uncles who had their cultivation broken were placed in the Misty Mountain Villa in the front mountain. They are all brocade disciples. Oh, junior brother Rin. Did senior brother Zhang mention the difference between brocade disciples and common disciples before? Zhang Xiaohua nodded and said, I know a little about it, haha. The martial uncles are not in the Misty Hall, and the original disciples of the Young Eagle Hall have all grown up in the past few years. There are no young disciples to fill in. Therefore, there are no disciples participating in the brocade gown competition, and the first to third level of the commoner gown competition. Moreover, the female disciples of the Mingcui Hall did not compete with us in the past. But when they arrived at the Shirxin Peak, they also competed with us male disciples. Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohua scratched his head and said in his heart, "You have less disciples. Of course, the rules have to be changed. What's there to be angry about?" The most unaccustomed thing is that under the interference of Deputy Hall Chief Zhong, the previous individual competition was cancelled. All the disciples actually competed together, and the top 6 were decided in the end. He also said that the inner disciples of Lingering Fragrance Peak competed like this. Zhang Xiaohua thought for a moment and said puzzledly, "Senior Brother Du, I don't think it's a big deal." Without waiting for Zhang Xiaohua to finish asking, Du Feng said bitterly, "Junior Brother Rin didn't participate, because the senior sisters of Mingcui Hall are very skilled in martial arts. Even if we male disciples practice hard, the top 6 in every competition are mostly female disciples. Only Zhao Jian can find a place among them. I'm ashamed to say that it was only last year that Senior Brother Ding and I got the last place among the 6. Ha ha ha." Zhang Xiaohua heard this and finally understood Du Feng's meaning. She had been laughing so hard in her heart that her stomach hurt. She held back her laughter and said, "The famous 3 beauties of Misty Hall should have been called last year, right?" Du Feng also laughed. "It has been called for a long time, but it was only last year that it started to live up to its name." Zhang Xiaohua rolled her eyes and asked, "Then in this year's martial arts exhibition, Senior Brother Du, are you confident?" Hee. Du Feng had a mysterious look on his face as he shook his head slightly. "This has to be kept a secret. However, I can let Junior Brother Rin know that the top 6 positions shouldn't be too big of a problem. Of course, Zhao Jian is dead, Xia Zai is disabled, and you also got the Meridian Nourishing Pill. I think you must be aiming for the first place." Seeing that Du Feng was tight-lipped, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but complain slightly. However, Chang'e and Chen Qin should be strong opponents, and Ding Chao may not be worse than Du Feng. Alas, it's a pity that the internal force in Second Brother's Dantian is still too short and has not become a big deal. Otherwise, Du Feng's chin would be broken. Later, when Zhang Xiaohua was about to tease Du Feng, she suddenly heard a loud and clear sound from Shirxin Peak, and then a big signal rushed into the air. -4. Chapter 817. The signal of an inner disciple? Du Feng heard the sound and immediately turned his head, asking curiously, "Why, are the inner disciples also interested in the martial arts exhibition of the Misty Hall?" Zhang Xiaohua joked, "Who knows?" Du Feng handed the invitation to Zhang Xiaohua and said with a smile, "I'm going to welcome the guests. Junior Brother Rin, please come and watch the martial arts exhibition." Of course, Zhang Xiaohua took it with a smile and cupped her hands in thanks. "I've long wanted to see the Misty Hall's disciples. It's a good opportunity. How can I not go?" Ha ha ha! Du Feng thought of the disciples that Zhang Xiaohua had taught a lesson when she first came to Shirxin Peak and laughed. "I'm afraid there will be a few disciples asking for advice from you." Zhang Xiaohua shrugged and said fearlessly, "It's best if there are a few female disciples. Let me have a taste of bullying a woman." Du Feng curled his lips and looked at the signal in the air. He cupped his hands and said, "Junior Brother Rin, you'd better stay here and think about how to deal with the female disciples. I'll take my leave." Zhang Xiaohua nodded and waited for Du Feng to go far before returning to the courtyard. If it was a normal day, Zhang Xiaohua would continue to return to the elixir room after making an incantation. But today, she didn't know why she was a little worried. She felt that there seemed to be some unfinished business in this small courtyard, so Zhang Xiaohua was not in a hurry to go back. First, she walked around the small courtyard to see if there was something she had forgotten. But everything was as usual after she walked around. Only Huan Huan ran to Zhang Xiaohua with hidden bitterness and licked her palm, expressing its feelings that Zhang Xiaohua was often not around. What's going on?" Zhang Xiaohua frowned slightly, Could it be that I've comprehended the way of karma so much that I've become crazy? Fortunately, the elixirs in the elixir room had just started to form, so there was no need to rush back. Zhang Xiaohua patted Huan's protruding horn and took out the futon. She sat on the ground and started to comprehend the talismans again. The last 9 talismans of the rabbit talisman were very magical. Zhang Xiaohua had comprehended the dozens of talismans in one go like a hot knife through butter. But she stopped here, which aroused Zhang Xiaohua's competitive spirit. She wanted to concentrate on comprehending them thoroughly. The last 9 small talismans of the rabbit talisman were not gathered together, but scattered from the beginning to the end. Zhang Xiaohua had only randomly picked up a talisman to comprehend at first. At this moment, looking at the rabbit talisman that was slowly rotating in her mud pill palace, her heart skipped a beat. Since this talisman was in the shape of a rabbit and not the shapeless array that she had encountered before, the 365 talismans must be different from each other. Yes, that is to say, among the 365 talismans that made up the rabbit talisman, 356 of them could be comprehended at any time. Oh, that's not right. It seemed that when she first started to comprehend, Zhang Xiaohua could not comprehend some of the talismans. Later on, she found other talismans and began to comprehend them. Then, one by one, she gradually comprehended 356 talismans. But which talisman was the first one that she comprehended? Zhang Xiaohua scratched her head. She did not think that there were steps to comprehend these talismans, so she did not deliberately memorize them. Now that she thought about it again, how could she have the slightest clue? Sigh, without anyone to guide me, the path of immortal Tao is really difficult. Zhang Xiaohua once again began to sigh with regret about the difficulty of cultivating alone. Perhaps the steps to comprehend this rabbit talisman are the same as the steps that an ordinary person takes to kill a rabbit. It's also unknown. Zhang Xiaohua looked at the rabbit talisman's throat maliciously. Luckily, she had just started to comprehend the rooster talisman, and the 3-legged golden crow talisman had not even started yet. Zhang Xiaohua still had enough time to test her own gains. If I can find the steps to comprehend, then I won't have to blindly fumble about, and the speed of comprehension will probably be faster. Sigh, just the rabbit talisman alone took so much time, and I have just started on the rooster talisman, and the 3-legged golden crow talisman is even more unclear. If I want to completely comprehend the 365 talismans on the essence of elixir, then how long will it take? Thinking of this, Zhang Xiaohua could not help but feel a little vexed. Sigh, really? Everyone, I don't even know how to scold this guy. The golden restriction on the essence of elixir is an innate divine restriction. Normally, ordinary cultivators of the immortal Tao would not even be able to see a single talisman. This guy is lucky enough to have a glimpse of this divine ability. If he can properly comprehend it, perhaps he can even walk out of the great Tao of talisman, puppet, immortal cultivation. This guy, instead of properly comprehending it, is actually blaming the heavens and blaming others, and is thinking about when he can fully comprehend it. He really doesn't know the severity of things. Moreover, Zhang Xiaohua had been resentful for a long time, but she also knew that diligent comprehension was the most fundamental principle. Just as she was about to immerse her divine sense into the talisman, she heard the wooden door of the small courtyard shake like a mountain. Who is so daring? Don't you know that this is the territory of the Pill Expansion Hall? Zhang Xiaohua heard and was actually enraged, shouting loudly. Junior brother Ren, it's me. Quickly open the door. Why is it that guy Dufeng again? Isn't he the inner disciple of the Lingering Fragrance Peak? Why did he run over here to pass the time? Zhang Xiaohua's eyes rolled, and she said without any malice, could it be that he was chased back by someone? Seeing that Dufeng was calling her urgently, Zhang Xiaohua slipped away and jogged to the door, smiling as she looked at the door and said, Senior brother Du, is the mountain path to receive the inner disciples already full? You can't find an empty spot? Who knew that when the door opened, Dufeng stretched out his hand and pulled Zhang Xiaohua's sleeve and said, Junior brother Rin, quickly come with me. Zhang Xiaohua very naturally pulled back and said, What? Du Feng stomped his foot and said, The inner disciple of the lingering fragrance peak wants to see you. Me? Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. She had never thought that this inner disciple was looking for her. Moreover, didn't she have the sudden inspiration? This time, why didn't she come? Why is she looking for me? Zhang Xiaohua spat out again. How would I know? Du Feng said angrily. But it seems to be a good thing. I don't see any law enforcement disciples following you. Zhang Xiaohua rolled her eyes and looked at Du Feng very disinterestedly. Brother, although we are familiar with each other, you can't slander my reputation at will. In these months, Du Feng had spent a lot of time with Zhang Xiaohua and knew that she was very close to the disciples of the Ethereal Hall. Even the transactions between the Pill-Expanding Hall and the Ethereal Hall were biased towards the Ethereal Hall. Even if he didn't know the reason, it was enough for him to treat Zhang Xiaohua as a friend. Du Feng patted Zhang Xiaohua's shoulder. You see, I hurriedly came to congratulate you, but I was beaten by you. He. You said you came to congratulate me, then tell me where the congratulation came from. Du Feng scratched his head. If you didn't go personally, who would know about the order of the lingering fragrance peak? Oh, I only know that Senior Brother Ding, who came out with me, has gone to the ethereal villa to call Senior Brother Zhang. Senior Brother Zhang? Zhang Xiaohu? Zhang Xiaohua was surprised. Yes, it's Senior Brother Zhang Xiaohu. He has been staying in the ethereal villa during this period. The messenger of the lingering fragrance, Peak, wants to find him. So of course, he has to go there to call him back. Zhang Xiaohua frowned and thought about it. Her first reaction was, could it be that the news was leaked and let the disciples of the lingering fragrance Peak know that Zhang Xiaohu and I are blood-related brothers? But then she denied it. Those who know about our relationship are Chang'e and Chen, Ohuyen and Qiutong, and Elduyu and Hitianshu, but they are far away from the lingering fragrance Peak. How could it be leaked? Or the disciples of the ethereal villa, whom second brother rescued, leaked the news? Send someone to catch second brother? But if this is the case, there are either some law enforcement disciples, or why do they call me over? Du Feng next to her was a little anxious. He was a disciple of the ethereal hall. Although he seemed to be very respectful to the disciples of the lingering fragrance Peak, there was a sense of dissatisfaction in his heart. It was uncertain whether he would obey in public, but oppose in private. However, in his eyes, Zhang Xiaohua was a disciple of the Tuiden Hall. If he was disrespectful to the disciples of the lingering fragrance Peak, there would be enough suffering waiting for him. Du Feng could not help but pull Zhang Xiaohua's sleeves again and said, Junior Brother Rin, even if you are in a daze, it's not too late to be in a daze in the ethereal hall. It's not a good thing for you to make the messenger of the lingering fragrance Peak wait anxiously. Seeing Du Feng's enthusiasm, Zhang Xiaohua could only follow him. As she walked, she muttered, Let's act according to the circumstances. If there's anything wrong, we will immediately escape. And let's stay closer to second brother. At most, we will escape to the pill room at the top of the mountain. Let's see who can find us then. Not to mention that Zhang Xiaohua was being overly suspicious here. Even ethereal villas, Zhang Xiaohu saw that Ding Chao had called him. His heart skipped a beat, and he looked at Li Jian nervously. Li Jian's dantian was still intact. The internal energy of the broken dantian was even purer. In order to not give himself away, Li Jian deliberately slowed down the improvement of his internal energy and cultivated it to be more vigorous and solid. At this moment, seeing Zhang Xiaohu's somewhat inquiring gaze, Li Jian frowned. After thinking for a while, he said, Xiaohu, you should go. Our ethereal villa is made up of loyal disciples of the original Misty School. We will never forget your kindness. If there is something strange with lingering fragrance Peak, even if we have to risk our lives, we will. Zhang Xiaohu hurriedly waved his hand. Not caring that it was inappropriate to interrupt Li Jian's words, he said, Martial ancestor, Li is too polite. This disciple has only fulfilled the obligations of a direct disciple. You don't have to worry about it. I already understand your meaning. Perhaps the messenger of Lingering Fragrance Peak has other matters. This disciple will know when he returns to take a look. Ding Chao did not come to Ethereal Villa often. A few years ago, he came occasionally and received a cold face from Li Jian. Now that he saw that Zhang Xiaohu had such a position in Li Jian's mouth, his heart was somewhat cold, but also somewhat proud. Needless to say, Ding Chao knew that even if his martial arts were superior and steadily surpassed Zhang Xiaohu, it was impossible for him to surpass Zhang Xiaohu's position in Ethereal Hall. As for his pride, of course, it was because even if Zhang Xiaohu had a better future than him, but so what? In Jianghu, strength was everything. If your martial arts were inferior to mine, then you would definitely be suppressed by me. Zhang Xiaohu did not know that Ding Chao, who was beside him, had so many thoughts in an instant. He only gave Li Jian a few words of advice before following Ding Chao back to Ethereal Hall. He wanted to see what the purpose of Lingering Fragrance Peak was. -4. Chapter 8:18. When Zhang Xiaohua arrived at the Misty Hall, there were already many people waiting inside. Zhang Xiaohua looked around and saw Yang Ruping, Gao Kunheng, and Anqin sitting on the chairs on the left and right respectively. There were also several disciples standing behind them. Zhang Xiaohua was familiar with Chang'e and Qin standing behind Anqin. Looking up, there was a masked female disciple sitting where Yang Ruping usually sat. Zhang Xiaohua couldn't tell if she was one of the people she had seen before. However, just by looking at her figure, Zhang Xiaohua knew that she was definitely not Qin of the Lingshan Peak. Before Zhang Xiaohua could look behind the messenger, she felt a pair of eyes staring at her. Zhang Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat. She raised her eyes and met that gaze. When that gaze met Zhang Xiaohua's eyes, it seemed to be shy and immediately shrank back. When Zhang Xiaohua saw it clearly, she felt a big stone falling to the ground. She immediately knew why the messenger of the Lingshan Peak had called her here. Behind the messenger, there was a woman in white clothes. Her snow-white face was already flushed. Wasn't she the inner alchemy disciple Zhang Xiaohua had saved 3 times in the Yulon Grand Canyon, Zhang Pinger? Needless to say, it was Zhang Pinger who had come to find her. She just didn't know why she had invited the inner disciple of the Lingshan Peak to be her messenger. Zhang Xiaohua had always remembered the kindness she had shown others very clearly. She had always casually forgotten the help she had given to others. This was also the case for saving Zhang Pinger 3 times. When she had just left the Yulon Grand Canyon and met senior brother Liu, her heart had been moved. However, when she saw that senior brother Liu and the others didn't say anything, her thoughts faded. She had been in the Shirxin Peak for several months and had long forgotten about it. If Zhang Pinger hadn't appeared here, he probably wouldn't have remembered her. This Zhang Pinger is quite interesting. It's been several months, and she only remembered to thank me. Oh, I understand. She is injured and has been recuperating. Just as he was thinking, he heard Anqin say, "Envoy Mu, this is Ren Xiaoyao, the disciple on duty at the Pill Repository Hall." When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she hurriedly stepped forward and saluted. "Disciple of the Pill Expansion Hall, Ren Xiaoyao greets Envoy Mu." "All right, I got it. Stand aside." Envoy Mu's voice was very cold and indifferent, as if he didn't like to see people. He was definitely not one of the inner disciples that Zhang Xiaohua had seen before. "Yes." Zhang Xiaohua also responded and stood obediently in the hall. Since he knew that the disciples of Lingering Fragrance Peak had called him here to commend him and to express Zhang Pinger's gratitude, then his second brother would definitely not be in any danger. The worst-case scenario that he had previously prepared for was also unnecessary. This reality was simply better than his best-case scenario. After standing for a short while, Zhang Xiaohu also hurried over. When he entered and saw Zhang Xiaohua standing in the hall, his heart thumped. Instantly, his mood was as complicated as Zhang Xiaohua's earlier, and his footsteps unconsciously slowed down. Seeing this, Zhang Xiaohua naturally knew his second brother's thoughts. She immediately cupped her hands and smiled. Greetings, Senior Brother Zhang. Long time no see. Due to the presence of the inner disciples of Lingering Fragrance Peak, Zhang Xiaohua's actions seemed rather reckless and inappropriate. However, he was standing in the hall and was on the path that Zhang Xiaohu had walked past. Casually giving a polite greeting was acceptable. When Zhang Xiaohu heard this, he also smiled and said, "Greetings, Junior Brother Rin." Then, without saying anything more, he walked straight to the front of the hall. When Yang Ruping saw this, she smiled and said to Envoy Mu, "This is my Misty Hall's chief disciple, Zhang Xiaohu. He was just at the foot of the mountain, settling down the original Misty School's disciples who had their martial arts crippled. Please forgive him for being late." Zhang Xiaohu also immediately greeted. Envoy Mu waved his hand and said, "No need. In the future, we will be considered as fellow disciples. You don't have to be so polite." These words were very strange. Not only was Yang Ruping stunned, even Zhang Xiaohu, who was greeting, secretly frowned. The inner disciples of Lingering Fragrance Peak are all proud and aloof. They treat the ordinary disciples of Lingering Fragrance cult as grass. Even the hall masters of the various halls do not pay any attention to them. When did the chief disciple of Misty Hall become her fellow disciple? But how could Yang Ruping ask in detail? She just smiled and said, "Thank you, Envoy Mu." Before she finished speaking, Envoy Mu immediately waved his hand and stood up, saying, "Since Zhang Xiaohu and Rin Xiaoyao are already here, then I will pass on the order of His Excellency." Qin Chen, who was gossipy, could not compare with him. While speaking, Envoy Mu took out a token from his arms and raised it over his head, saying, "Pass on the order of His Excellency." The disciple of Misty Hall, Zhang Xiaohu, has excellent talent and is a promising talent. In view of the fact that his original master's martial arts had been crippled and could not teach him martial arts, Jingxian of Lingering Fragrance Peak hereby accepts him as a registered disciple. In the future, if Zhang Xiaohu has any doubts about his martial arts, he can go to Lingering Fragrance Peak and ask the disciples on duty to solve his doubts. As soon as Envoy Mu's voice fell, everyone in the hall was shocked by the order of His Excellency. Zhang Xiaohua laughed in his heart. This His Excellency is really interesting. He bestowed the Yuhuan Heart Sutra and the Yuhuan Pill, but he was still not at ease and wanted to rope in Second Brother further. He actually found an inner disciple of Lingering Fragrance Peak to be Second Brother's master. It's fine to be a master, but it's still a registered disciple. Is it so difficult to be an inner disciple? It's fine if it's just a registered disciple. Why does it have to be the disciple on duty to solve his doubts, instead of the inner disciple called Jingxian? Is this the difference between an inner disciple and a registered disciple? When has His Excellency been so stingy? Just as Zhang Xiaohua was snickering, he suddenly moved again. Jingxian? Could it be the Shirtai who saved me by the river? That dream, is it also at Lingering Fragrance Peak? Zhang Xiaohua suddenly became excited. His heart, that had been tempered by the way of immortality, could not help but tremble. There were even some goosebumps appearing on his arms. Dream, you are actually spreading the incense cult. I can finally see you. But just as Zhang Xiaohua was so excited that his whole body turned cold, he heard Yang Ruping say in shock, "Envoy Mu, could it be that you remembered wrongly? This martial Aunt Jingxian, didn't she already pass away a few years ago? How could she accept Zhang Xiaohu as a registered disciple?" At this time, Zhang Xiaohua did not have time to think about Zhang Xiaohu's matter. Once he heard this, his heart turned cold by more than half. Jingxian has already passed away? Then isn't this Jingxian by Jingxian? Yes, Shirtai's martial arts is so high. How could she suddenly pass away? There are many people with the same name in this world. Not to mention others. Just this Misty School's Qin Qin and by Jingxian Peak's Qin Qin are two completely different people. Meng, where are you? Will I still be able to see you? Envoy Mu's tone was still cold. Master Yang, Pay attention to your tone. Before I came, I was also quite surprised, but I firmly believe that the sect leader's decree can't be wrong. Master Yang, you can carefully read the sect leader's decree. Maybe you can know something. This, Yang Ruping was tongue-tied and did not know what to say. At this moment, Zhang Xiaohu took a step forward and said loudly, reporting to Envoy Mu, "This disciple is the direct disciple of the Misty Sect. Although the master who taught me martial arts has been crippled, he has no difficulty in teaching this disciple martial arts. This disciple does not wish to seek help from another master. This is the order of the sect leader. Still." Speaking of this, Zhang Xiaohu gritted his teeth and said, "Envoy Mu, please go back and report to the sect leader and ask the sect leader to withdraw his decree." These words were even more shocking than what Envoy Mu had just said. Shua. Everyone's eyes were fixed on Zhang Xiaohu. Envoy Mu's tone did not change. He said coldly, "Zhang Xiaohu, are you questioning the sect leader's decree?" This, Zhang Xiaohu gritted his teeth and said, "Please reconsider. Do you know the second rule of Chuanqiang cult? Tell me." This, Zhang Xiaohu's forehead was covered in cold sweat. He whispered, "The second rule of Chuanqiang cult is that only fools can question and not follow the sect leader's decree. But those who can question and not follow the sect leader's decree are not fools." Zhang Xiaohua, who was still thinking about the dream, heard the second rule of Chuanqiang cult. She felt that it was absurd. Of course, when Chen Qin of Lingxiang Peak came to the Misty Hall to pass down the decree of the leader and punish Zhao Jian, Zhang Xiaohua had already seen the third rule of the fragrant cult. Disciples who kill each other shall be killed without mercy. This rule was considered normal, but Zhang Xiaohua felt that this rule should be placed first. When he heard the first rule of the fragrant cult, Zhang Xiaohua had a feeling of not knowing whether to laugh or cry. This was an extremely common act of betrayal, but in Chuanqiang cult, it was the first rule of Chuanqiang cult. It was really incomprehensible. At that time, Zhang Xiaohua really wanted to know what the second rule was. But at that time, she had to treat her second brother's injury and had forgotten about it. But today, she could actually hear the second rule of Chuanqiang cult. She was really lucky, and the contents of it, alas, how should she say it? As long as one was not a fool, one would know that only fools can question and not follow the sect leader's decree. And those who can question and not follow the sect leader's decree are not fools. These two sentences were contradictory. It was impossible for them to exist at the same time. In other words, as long as it was the decree of the sect leader, all the disciples of Chuanqiang cult must follow and follow it. Seeing that Zhang Xiaohu did not speak, Messenger Mu said, "Zhang Xiaohu, the so-called Misty School, the so-called Misty Hall, is just a thought of by the sect leader. Your so-called Misty School, the chief disciple of the Misty Hall. What does it have to do with being a registered disciple of martial and Jingxian? Your martial arts is now the plain world heart technique. Can your original master guide you? Only by obtaining the guidance of the lost fragrances, peak guardian disciple, can you cultivate the primal expanse heart technique to great success." Then he said coldly, "I don't want you to do anything irrational on account of the fact that you're about to become a registered inner disciple. That's why I'm reminding you. It's up to you whether you want to listen or not." -4. Chapter 819. Sigh. Zhang Xiaohu's heart was incomparably vexed. If I had known that accepting the Su Huan mantra would bring me such trouble, why would I accept it? Greed for small gains will lead to big losses. The words of the ancients are indeed true. In fact, when Zhang Xiaohu accepted the Su Huan mantra and the Su Huan pill, he thought that his dantian was already broken and that he was already a cripple. Whether he accepted the Su Huan mantra and the Su Huan pill or not, it was the same. He was greedy for small gains and wanted to give it to Chang'e if he couldn't cultivate it. But later, he found that he could cultivate it and took advantage of the situation to follow Lingxiang Peak and cultivate both the Su Huan mantra and the misty divine art. But he never thought that for this Su Huan mantra, he would lose his identity as a direct disciple of the Misty School. Although Envoy Mu made it sound easy and said that he was only a registered disciple of Jingxian and didn't need to be personally taught by others in the underworld and could only be taught by the disciples on duty. But in this way, he was after all the disciple of one of the elders of the Lingshan Peak and would be estranged from his identity as a Misty School disciple. In the future, if something happened that was out of his control, it would be something he didn't want to see. But in this cult of fragrance, the second rule clearly stated that only a fool could not follow the orders of the cult leader. Was he a fool? Definitely not. Needless to say, he had to follow the cult leader's orders. Zhang Xiaohu opened his mouth, but couldn't say anything. Envoy Mu saw this and took out a token from his bosom and handed it to Yang Ruping. This is the token of a registered disciple of the inner sect. I ask Hall Master Yang to keep it for me. The cult leader said that this matter can be considered by Zhang Xiaohu at most 10 days. If Zhang Xiaohu doesn't accept the cult leader's orders, I ask Hall Master Yang to return this token to the Lingshan Peak. Zhang Xiaohua secretly marveled. This cult leader doesn't seem to be a difficult person to talk to. If what she said was true, that she could not guide Second Brother in his martial arts for the sake of heroine, then Second Brother would become a so-called disciple in name only to make it easier for the inner sanctum disciples to guide him in his martial arts. It was not a big deal. Besides, now that the Misty School was located at Shirxin Peak, it was already a Misty School. Second Brother's identity as a direct disciple of the Misty School was really meaningless. Even if Li Jian and the others from the Misty Mountain Villa recovered their martial arts, would they still be able to set off a wave in the aroma cult? Seeing this, Zhang Xiaohu was overjoyed. He cupped his hands and said, "Thank you for your concern, sect leader. I will definitely give you a clear answer before the time limit." Yes, Junior Martial Brother Zhang, please reconsider. Don't let down the sect leader's good intentions. Although Emissary Mu expressed his concern, how could there be any trace of concern in his words? Take a seat. Emissary Mu waved his hand and said, "Pill Expanding Hall's Grass Division's disciple, Ren Xiaoyao, please come forward." Zhang Xiaohua laughed in his heart. It's this Xiaoxiao's turn. I wonder what kind of gift Zhang Pinger gave me as a thank you gift. Don't tell me it's an entire bottle of Yuhuandan pill. Or maybe it's an outer disciple slot. However, I have already met Second Brother. He is very comfortable here at Shirxin Peak. Why should I go to Wuming Hall? However, I don't think it's an outer disciple slot. That day, Lu Lihong obtained a few hundred years old ginseng and saved the life of an inner sanctum elder. That was why he was given an outer disciple slot. I only saved Zhang Pinger and gave her a stalk of origin returning grass. It can be considered as saving the life of an inner sanctum alchemist. Oh, could it be some kind of cultivation method? If it's just that, why don't you give it to Second Brother? With that thought, Zhang Xiaohua walked forward and cupped his hands. Pill Expanding Hall's disciple, Ren Xiaoyao, greets Emissary Mu. As he spoke, he raised his eyes and looked at Zhang Pinger, who didn't dare to look at him. Zhang Pinger's face was still red, and she would occasionally look over to avoid Zhang Xiaohua's gaze. Emissary Mu raised his token again and said, "Sect leader has issued a decree. Pill Expanding Hall's disciple, Zhang Xiaohua, is chivalrous and courageous. Although his martial arts are weak, he is willing to sacrifice himself for others. He is the role model of the incense cult's disciples. For this reason, Zhang Xiaohua is allowed to become an inner sanctum alchemist. He can enter the inner sanctum to learn the art of alchemy and practice inner sanctum martial arts." What? Everyone in the hall was once again shocked by the sect leader's decree. An inner sanctum alchemist. Although he couldn't be compared to the inner sect disciples, but he was still an inner sect disciple and couldn't be mentioned in the same breath as the Pill Expansion Hall or the Heaven and Earth Hall. This insignificant little medicine boy from the Grass Division had actually hit the jackpot and gained the favor of the hierarch. He had even specially issued a decree for an inner sect disciple to pass on his orders. How many people in the incense-spreading cult had such an honor? The Misty Hall's disciples only knew that Zhang Xiaohua was just a little medicine boy who was saved by Zhang Xiaohu. Furthermore, he had a bad reputation for teasing his junior sister in the first Faith Peak. When they heard the decree, they couldn't help but feel envious. To be able to tease her in such a high manner, it is really rare. Zhang Xiaohua was even more shocked by the decree. He was living a comfortable life in the first Faith Peak. How could he be willing to go anywhere else? Moreover, the Lingxiang Peak was filled with crouching tigers and hidden dragons. If his identity as an immortal cultivator was discovered, then it would be too late for him to cry. Unknowingly, Zhang Xiaohua was a little hesitant. Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua did not speak, Envoy Mu's expression could not be seen. First, Zhang Ping, Er's face was a little pale. She had painstakingly persuaded her master to get this from the hierarch. She had hoped to see a surprised smile on Zhang Xiaohua's face, but looking at his expression, it seemed like he was very dissatisfied. Could it be that he is complaining that I only got him an inner sanctum alchemist apprentice? Yes, of course. With his martial arts, perhaps he should go to the Wombing Hall. But doesn't he know my thoughts? After all, the Wombing Hall is an outer sanctum. Although this inner sanctum alchemist apprentice, it is an inner sanctum after all, and often. For a moment, Zhang Pinger was full of sorrow. What, Rin Xiaoyao, do you also want to question the sect leader's decree? Or are you not satisfied with the sect leader's bestowment? Obviously, Envoy Mu's attitude toward Zhang Xiaohua and Zhang Xiaohu was different. His tone was almost freezing. She didn't understand why Envoy Mu was so generous to Zhang Xiaohu and even asked him to consider for 10 days. However, she knew that if Zhang Xiaohua didn't agree now, Envoy Mu would never give her time to consider. Although Zhang Xiaohua's martial arts were good, he might not be able to gain an advantage in front of an inner sanctum alchemist. Moreover, he had violated the sect leader's decree, so everyone could kill him. Unknowingly, she had already thrown away her shyness and kept giving Zhang Xiaohua meaningful glances. After Zhang Xiaohua heard Envoy Mu's words, she couldn't help but stare blankly for a moment before her heart turned around. The inner sanctum alchemist seems to be staying at the lingering fragrance peak. Of course, that damned Deputy Hall Master Zhong was actually brought back to the lingering fragrance peak safely after dealing with Second Brother. Also, those enforcement disciples actually caused Second Brother's injuries to be so serious. I thought that I would have to find a chance to sneak up to the lingering fragrance peak in the future, but now I have actually been given such a good opportunity. Second Brother seems to be fine here. As long as the Misty Mountain Villa's disciples have the Meridian Nourishing Pill and the Bone Congealing Pill, they should be able to recover as long as they have enough time. Second Brother's Yuhuan Mental Cultivation Method and Misty Divine Art are also steadily improving. That Qi-generating pill can't be given to him rashly for the time being. Oh Yan's condition has already recovered, and I haven't discovered any abnormalities. I can also leave with peace of mind. It's just that if I leave, the pill expanding hall will send a new disciple on duty. This Aunt Qin will suffer again. I estimate that I will have to give her at least 40% of the benefits from the transaction. Zhang Xiaohua thought about a lot of things. However, after thinking about it, she could leave the Shirxin Peak. Originally, this Shirxin Peak was the Misty Mountain Villa's Shirxin Peak. Zhang Xiaohua's arrival was nothing more than an anomaly. Since Zhang Xiaohu had already obtained the support of the lingering fragrance peak, Zhang Xiaohua staying here really didn't affect anything. Could it be that she could hide at the peak of the Shirxin Peak and refine pills for the Misty School? Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help glancing sideways at Zhang Xiaohu beside her. She saw that Zhang Xiaohu was also looking at Zhang Xiaohua. When he saw Zhang Xiaohua looking at him, he winked slightly and nodded inconspicuously. Zhang Xiaohua understood and immediately put on a big smile. She cupped her hands and said, "Lord Messenger, please don't be angry. I'm so happy that I'm silly. Some time ago, there was a senior brother called Lu Lihong in the pill-expanding hall. He obtained some opportunities and offered 100-year-old ginseng to the lingering fragrance peak. He was bestowed with a martial arts mental cultivation method by the inner door and also obtained a place as an outer door disciple. I thought that the most exaggerated one would be similar to senior brother Lu. But who would have thought that he could become an inner door disciple of alchemy? This is really beyond my expectation. And Messenger Mu sneered and said, "You are an inner door alchemy disciple and not an inner door alchemy disciple. You have to understand this. How can a medicine boy from the pill-expanding hall become an inner door alchemy disciple? Although you are an inner door alchemy disciple, it is not something that an outer door disciple can compare to. If you become an inner door alchemy disciple, not to mention the martial arts mental cultivation method that senior brother Lu obtained, you can even learn 10 more sets of it. If it wasn't for someone sparing no effort for you, how could you obtain such an opportunity? Now you know that this opportunity is not easy. Then thank the person who gave you this opportunity." As he spoke, he took out another token and handed it over. "This is your token. You need to arrive at the lingering fragrance peak within 10 days. If you don't arrive by then, there is no need for me to say it. I'm sure you know the consequences. How would Zhang Xiaohua know?" She pondered for a moment before reaching out to receive it. She smiled and said, "Thank you, Lord Envoy." After Envoy Mu handed over the token, he immediately withdrew his hand as if he was afraid of dirtying his hands. He waved his hand and stood up. "Hall Master Yang, this envoy has finished delivering the decree. I dare not stay any longer. I still have to return to the peak to report. Farewell." Without waiting for Yang Ruping to be courteous, she lifted her head and walked out. The female disciples behind her followed, closely behind. Only Zhang Ping had a joyful expression on her face. Her eyes were filled with concern as she looked at Zhang Xiaohua. When she walked past Zhang Xiaohua, she extended her jade-like hand and carefully made a 10 sign. Clearly, she was reminding Zhang Xiaohua of the 10-day deadline and read more chapters. Please, -4. Chapter 8:20. Envoy Mu of the Lingering Fragrance Peak led his entourage out of the Misty Hall. Yang Ruping and the other disciples of the Misty Hall saw them off. Zhang Xiaohua, as the newly appointed disciple of the Pill-Expanding Hall, also accompanied them. After Envoy Mu left the mountain with his head held high, Yang Ruping turned to look at Zhang Xiaohua and smiled. "Junior nephew Rin is indeed blessed. First, you were saved by my hall, Zhang Xiaohu. Then, you were sent to the Shirxin Peak. Not long after you arrived, you were appointed as an apprentice alchemist disciple. Let me congratulate you first. If there is a chance in the future, please take care of the Misty Hall." Zhang Xiaohua quickly bowed and said that he did not dare to do so. Yang Ruping nodded at him and then led the crowd back to the Misty Hall. After the crowd left, Du Feng stepped forward and cupped his hands. "Congratulations, junior brother Rin. In less than 2 hours, you are already an inner disciple. In the future, you will have to look up to me." Zhang Xiaohua smiled bitterly and waved his hand. "Senior brother Du, don't make fun of me. I am confused and have no idea what is going on." "Oh, yes, an apprentice alchemist disciple. What does this mean?" Du Feng shook his head and said, "Junior brother Rin, you are a disciple of the Pill-Expanding Hall. Even you don't know the meaning of an apprentice alchemist disciple. How would I know?" Zhang Xiaohua was speechless. Of course, the disciples of the Misty Hall only joined the fragrant religion in the recent 4 to 5 years. Their freedom was restricted by the disciples of the Lingering Fragrance Peak. How would they know about the inner disciples of the Lingering Fragrance Peak? But he himself had just joined the fragrant religion and came later than Du Feng. These things were naturally unknown to Du Feng. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "There are many things in the Lingering Fragrance Peak that ordinary disciples like us don't know. Since he is an inner disciple, his future should be good. I hope Senior Brother Du will continue to work hard and join the lingering fragrance peak when the opportunity arises. How is that possible? Du Feng shook his head like a rattledrum. It is hard to say in the future, at least for our generation of disciples. There is absolutely no such possibility. Haha, isn't your eldest Senior Brother Zhang already an inner disciple? Du Feng had a strange look on his face, but he didn't dare to speak his mind to Zhang Xiaohua. He only said, perfunctorily, Senior Brother Zhang's inner disciple identity seems to be quite different from Junior Brother Ren's. Of course, the identities of these two people were naturally very different, and Zhang Xiaohu was actually assigned to Shirtai as a registered disciple, which was even more puzzling to everyone. In the Misty Hall, several hall masters and Zhang Xiaohu were carefully reading the decree of the hierarch. Vice Hall Master Gao's face was beaming with happiness as he said with a smile, Zhang Xiaohu, I know you should be called Junior Martial Brother Zhang. This hall knows that cult leader His Excellency thinks highly of Junior Martial Brother Zhang, but I absolutely didn't expect it to be to this extent. TSK, he even let Martial Uncle Jing Xian accept you as a registered disciple. This is a preferential treatment among the ordinary disciples in the past years. Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohu was very embarrassed. Looking at Yang Ruping, who was sitting in the hall, he didn't know how to answer Gao Kunheng's words. Previously, he was 2 generations below Yang Ruping. Even though he usually addressed her as Hall Master or Disciple, according to the ethereal sect seniority, he still had to address Yang Ruping as Grandmaster or something like that. But now, all of a sudden, he was on par with her in terms of seniority. This was something that he had never dreamt of. Seeing Zhang Xiaohu's embarrassment, Yang Ruping's face was still gloomy. She snorted and asked, Vice Hall Master Feng, Vice Hall Master Qin, tell me, what does cult leader mean? Vice Hall Master Feng still smiled and said, Hall Master Yang, didn't I just say it? Cult leader His Excellency supports Zhang Xiaohu and finds an excuse to let him become an inner disciple. But Junior Martial Brother Zhang is too old and his martial arts is poor. So he thought of letting Martial Uncle Jing Xian accept him as a registered disciple first. Didn't Hall Master Yang say it just now? Martial Uncle Jing Xian has already passed away. So, of course, she can't guide Junior Martial Brother Zhang in his martial arts. Junior Martial Brother Zhang's Su Huan Sutra does indeed need someone to guide him. Yang Ruping nodded slightly and turned to look at Aunt Qin. Aunt Qin frowned and thought for a long time before saying apologetically, Hall Master Yang, this one's opinion is similar to Vice Hall Master Feng's. Since cult leader His Excellency wants to support Zhang Xiaohu, she must have many ways. Perhaps this method is more direct. This one doesn't know the situation of you inner disciples. But giving Zhang Xiaohu such a good opportunity to cultivate martial arts, I think Zhang Xiaohu will be in a difficult position. As she spoke, she looked at Zhang Xiaohu. What could Zhang Xiaohu say? He could only shrug and look at Yang Ruping. Sigh. Yang Ruping sighed again. She looked at the puzzled Zhang Xiaohu and said, Xiaohu, from the point of view of the disciples of spreading incense religion, this is definitely a great opportunity. Without going through any tests, you can become a disciple of an inner sect elder. Even if you're just a registered disciple, you'll still get the same opportunity to cultivate as an inner sect disciple. Ren Ruping has been in spreading incense religion for so many years, and so many disciples have contributed greatly to spreading incense religion. So they have to be rewarded like this. But from the perspective of a direct disciple of the Misty School, this seems to be a betrayal of the Master. Vice Hall Master Feng immediately expressed his disdain. Hall Master Yang's words are somewhat wrong. There is no such thing as a Misty School now. They are all disciples of the cult of Fragrance's Misty Hall. The status of a direct disciple. Sigh, it's just... Then she looked at Zhang Xiaohu and didn't continue. Aunt Qin also nodded. Vice Hall Master Feng's words may not be pleasant to hear, but they make sense. Perhaps the cult leader wants to give Zhang Xiaohu the status of an inner disciple, and also the status of a direct disciple of the Misty School. Otherwise, she wouldn't have asked Elder Jingxian, who has already passed away, to be his master. Yang Ruping nodded slightly. This hall master has the same thoughts, but then she asked again, Xiaohu, what do you think? At this time, Zhang Xiaohu already had a plan. He smiled and said, Hall master, after listening to the analysis of the 3 hall masters. This disciple feels that this disciple is first and foremost a direct disciple of the Misty School. Only then can this disciple be an in-name disciple of Elder Jingxian. If this is not possible, then this disciple will still go to the Lingxiang Peak to ask the cult leader for instructions and ask her to withdraw her order. Yang Ruping smiled and said, It's best that you have such thoughts. However, the cult leader appointed you as Marshal Aunt Jingxian's in-name disciple to protect your status as a direct disciple of the Misty School. If it were any other elder who was still alive, I'm afraid that you would really have to change your sect. Then she looked at the 2 hall masters and said, This matter should be decided by Xiaohu himself. Xiaohu, go ask your master and Marshal Aunt first, and see what their opinions are. If possible, also go ask your Marshal ancestrally. After all, the relationship with the Misty School is getting better day by day. There is no harm in consulting more. Yes, Hall Master, this disciple will go and ask now. Zhang Xiaohu said respectfully, and then left the Misty Hall. When Zhang Xiaohu walked out of the Misty Hall, Yang Ruping and Aunt Qin exchanged glances and said, This matter is a good thing for Zhang Xiaohu and the Misty Hall, but I don't know why the cult leader values Zhang Xiaohu so much. This is really unreasonable. Gao Kunheng smiled and said, The cult leader's wisdom is like the sea. How can us juniors guess what she has done? Anyway, there is another inner disciple in the Misty Hall. Hall Master Yang also has face. Face. Yang Ruping smiled bitterly and said, Deputy Hall Master Xiao, you know it in your heart. Only the inner disciples on the Lingering Fragrance Peak have limitless prestige. If you leave the Lingering Fragrance Peak, even if you become a Hall Master, you won't be able to win the cult leader's favor. Deputy Hall Master Xiao said indifferently, In the Lingering Fragrance Peak, I am just an ordinary person. I can't be compared to Senior Sister Yang, who was pampered in the past. Haha, in fact, this is the rule of the Lingering Fragrance cult. It is normal for the inner disciples to be respected. Not to mention that the 3 hall masters of the Misty Hall were guessing the cult leader's thoughts in the Misty Hall. Zhang Xiaohu didn't dare to stay for a while after leaving the Misty Hall. He went straight to Wen Wenhai's small courtyard. Wen Wenhai was still as calm as before. He was watering the small medicine field in the courtyard, little by little. It was as if he was unmoved in the face of a landslide. Although Zhang Xiaohu's footsteps were light, Wen Wenhai had already recovered his internal strength. Although his cultivation was not profound, it was a blessing in disguise. This time his cultivation was more profound than before. Before Zhang Xiaohu opened the door, he heard Wen Wenhai laugh and say, Xiaohu, why are you in such a hurry? Your breath is a little chaotic. This is not good for your cultivation. When Zhang Xiaohu heard this, he immediately realized that he was thinking about discussing with his master. He ran all the way and lacked the necessary bearing. Therefore, he took a deep breath and said, This disciple was wrong. Master once said that there is nothing in this world that cannot be solved. The answer to all problems is the world. This disciple only listened but didn't remember it in his heart. Now that I think about it, it is quite reasonable. You little brat, your master is lecturing you, but you flatter your master. What does this sentence have to do with you being in a hurry now? Zhang Xiaohu touched his head and said, I have encountered a thorny problem and need to discuss it with my master. Oh, is it the problem of your Misty Hall or the Misty Heights? Wen Wenhai was also surprised. He put down the things in his hand and walked out of the medicine field step by step. His demeanor was exactly the same as before when he did not have martial arts. When Zhang Xiaohu told him about the decree of the hierarch of lingering fragrance peak, even when Wenhai scratched his head. Yes, no one knew better than him about Zhang Xiaohu's aptitude. It was indeed good, but it was not to the point that he was snatched as a disciple by the cult of fragrance. Moreover, if they snatched him, they snatched him. Why would they give him a registered disciple? He did not understand. What do you think? When Wenhai asked. This. Zhang Xiaohu was a little hesitant. -4. Chapter 8:21. When Wenhai seemed to know what Zhang Xiaohu was thinking, he smiled and said, Xiaohu, do you also think that since you're just a registered disciple of the inner sect, and not a real inheritor of the incense cult, you should just accept it? Yes. Zhang Xiaohu nodded honestly. He blushed a little and said, It's like this. At first, I didn't know the meaning of this decree and was very conflicted. However, after listening to Hall Leader Yang and the others' analysis, it seems that the leader doesn't want to cover up my identity as a direct disciple. Moreover, from what happened at Shershin Peak during this period, the leader doesn't want to do anything to our Misty School. So, I'm here to ask for your opinion. Alas, how can there be much freedom under someone else's roof? Besides, as a direct disciple of the Misty School, since the leader has already given face to the Misty School, you must have a plan in mind. Zhang Xiaohu listened and nodded slightly. Yes, but what's your opinion, master? Haha, you're now the chief disciple of the Misty School. Even I have to listen to you. Do you still need to discuss this with me? Besides, you're now fully fledged. I'm only giving you a reference. You still have to make all the decisions yourself. I know, master. I've already decided on other things, but this involves the direct disciple of the Misty School. I still want to hear your opinion. Needless to say, no opinion means you've expressed your opinion. You know. Zhang Xiaohu was speechless. He didn't give up and said, Master, don't you want to discuss it with Marshal Uncle and the others? When Wenhai smiled and shook his head slightly. Alas, all right. Master, I still want to ask Marshal Uncle Li and the others for their opinion. You see, when Wenhai nodded again. Then go. In fact, Marshal Uncle Li and the others may have more right to speak. Zhang Xiaohu excused himself and left. When Wenhai watched him leave, but his eyes were fixed on Zhang Xiaohu's back for a long, long time. Only when Zhang Xiaohu was long gone did Wenhai let out a sigh. No one knew what he was thinking, but he slowly walked out of the courtyard towards Lu Yueming. His steps were even more unsteady than before he recovered his martial arts. Ethereal heights inside the conference hall. What? Lingxiang Peak wants to accept you as a registered disciple of the inner sect? And to let an old woman who has been dead for a long time be your master? Is there a mistake? This Lingxiang Peak's thief old woman is up to something? When Zhang Xiaohu finished talking about the sect leader's decree, Lu Qingyang, who was lying on the chair and pretending that his joints had not recovered, jumped up. He opened his eyes wide and said puzzledly, Xiaohu, I advise you not to go. The ancients say, it's better to be the head of a chicken than the tail of a phoenix. You are also a direct disciple of our Misty School and the chief disciple. Don't you get to eat and drink whatever you want? If you're in a bad mood, you can casually find 2 female disciples to flirt with. Isn't that better than anything else? Moreover, I know that the status of female disciples in Lingxiang Peak is very high. If you go, you'll only be carrying water to wash their feet. What are you going to do? Old 5. Li Jian saw that Lu Qingyang's words were getting more and more unreliable. He snorted and said, Don't be impolite. Xiaohu really has a problem. Second brother, I'm just thinking for Xiaohu. We're a good direct disciple, but he was suddenly roped in by others and even changed his master. Aren't you worried? Zhang Xiaohu said awkwardly, Martial Ancestor Lu, it's not like that. Soon after, he told Lu Qingyang about Yang Rupiing's analysis. Lu Qingyang was even more puzzled. The old woman in Lingxiang Peak is crazy. There's nothing to say. I don't know what she's thinking. Even if she wants to train you, she could just find someone to teach you martial arts. Why waste so much effort? It's obvious that she has bad intentions. Li Jian chuckled and said, Then why don't you tell me where she has bad intentions? This is for sure. Zhang Xiaohu is not that old woman's relative. They haven't even met before. She actually gave such a big gift to Xiaohu. Where in the world would a pie fall from the sky? It's definitely a weasel paying a visit to a chicken. She has bad intentions. Seeing that Lu Qingyang was unable to say anything, Li Jian turned to Zhang Xiaohu and asked, What did your master say? Master said to listen to me. Li Jian was naturally interested. Then what do you think? Zhang Xiaohu glanced at Lu Qingyang and whispered, I think that since it doesn't conflict with our identity as a direct disciple of the Misty School, it's not bad to be a registered disciple of the inner sect. Since we'll be living in the Lingxiang cult in the future, it may be more convenient to have this identity. You. Lu Qingyang stamped her foot. Zhang Xiaohu, are you blind? You believe the words of that old woman from Lingxiang Peak? Who knows what she's selling in her gourd? Zhang Xiaohu blushed a little, but his eyes still looked at Li Jian. He seemed to be somewhat determined. Li Jian looked at Zhang Xiaohu and frowned. His thoughts were far more complicated than Lu Qingyang's. Yes, Misty Mountain Villa had been fighting with Lingxiang Peak for 5 years and had always been very unyielding. Thousands of disciples had put their lives at the back of their minds and didn't care about Lingxiang Peak. They also didn't interact with Misty Hall and didn't accept Misty Hall's help. They only relied on themselves and had enough food and clothing. But all of this was based on the fact that thousands of people in Misty Mountain Villa had their martial arts crippled. These people were undoubtedly the backbone of the Misty School and were all unyielding. They were willing to fight with Lingxiang Peak to the end. But from another point of view, they couldn't see the future and couldn't see hope. They were the most passive in their struggle. Even Li Jian himself had such thoughts. Since my martial arts have been crippled and I'd rather die, why should I lose my reputation and bow to Lingxiang Peak? It's better to fight with you to the end and leave a good reputation in Jianghu. But now, Zhang Xiaohua's appearance had restored the martial arts of thousands of Misty School's disciples who had long lost confidence. It had reawakened their desire to live. At the same time, they had other plans in their hearts. In fact, even Li Jian had considered the future when he had condensed the first strand of internal energy. Misty School was now under the wings of Lingxiang cult. They couldn't fight for a long time. Only compromise was the way to survive. Sometimes, compromising wasn't showing weakness, nor did it mean surrendering. It was brewing strength and waiting for the East Mountain to rise again. But what did the East Mountain need to rise again? In addition to strength, it could also be an opportunity. This direct disciple named Zhang Xiaohu in front of him didn't leave a deep impression in Li Jian's eyes. But he could be an opportunity for the Misty School's revival. Of course, the revival of the Misty School was too far away. Li Jian didn't dare to have extravagant hopes. But when he thought of the leader of Lingxiang Peak supporting Zhang Xiaohu, first bestowing the inner sect's martial arts mantra and elixirs, and this time accepting him as an inner sect's registered disciple, it was needless to say that he had chosen the same path as Yang Rupiying, Zhong Pei, and Gao Kunheng, to cultivate him as the Misty Hall's hall master. And Zhang Xiaohu himself was a great benefactor to the thousands of people in Misty Mountain Villa, more important than his life. He was simply a collection of thousands of people's favor. If he were to become the Misty Hall's hall master, the disciples of Misty Mountain Villa wouldn't have any objections. Thinking of this, Li Jian suddenly had a very absurd idea. Is this Zhang Xiaohu sent by Lingxiang Peak? Is his martial arts recovery technique from Lingxiang Peak? Is it the intention of that old woman from Lingxiang Peak to let us recover our martial arts? But then he laughed secretly. How is this possible? The thousands of people in the Misty School are certainly a considerable force, but in the Lingxiang cult, it's really not worth mentioning. The Lingxiang cult would never restore the martial arts of thousands of people for any purpose. That's really meaningless. looking at Zhang Xiaohu again. Although his face was a little red, his eyes didn't shrink. Presumably, he already had some ideas in his mind. AI! Even this old man couldn't break free from his utilitarian heart in the past, let alone such a big fat meat in front of his eyes. He doesn't need to pay a price to obtain it. No wonder he would be tempted. Thus Li Jian's face became cold, and he said, Zhang Xiaohu, you are the direct disciple of my Misty School, and also the chief disciple. If you want to change your school and find another master, I, as your Misty School's grandmaster, certainly can agree. Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohu's eyes flashed with a trace of joy. He cupped his hands and said, Rest assured, grandmasterly, if it was this kind of thing, this disciple wouldn't have come to discuss it with grandmasters. And Li Jian's tone was still indifferent. If you want the arrangement of the Lingering Fragrance Peak's schoolmaster to simply give you pointers on martial arts, then we have nothing to say. After all, your Dantian already has the inner strength of the Su Huan cultivation method. If you want to reach the large success stage, then you really have to borrow the strength of the Lingering Fragrance Peak's inner sect disciples. Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohu's face carried a smile, and he said, Many thanks, Grand Masterly, for your help. Li Jian shook his head. Actually, even if you don't come, even if we don't agree, what can we do? Why would we block your shortcut to increasing your strength? Since when one Hai, Li Jian, and the others all agreed, Zhang Xiaohu's heart could be considered to have put down a stone. He cupped his hands and bid farewell to Li Jian and the others. Looking at Zhang Xiaohu's departing figure, Lu Qingyang shouted, What is that demonic old woman doing? I really don't understand. There's definitely something fishy going on here. Li Jian also looked on indifferently and said, Who knows? In any case, no matter what fishy things are, they will eventually appear. You and I will just have to wait and see. Wait and see, wait and see. Lu Qingyang curled his lips and said, Wait until all of our Misty School's disciples have been poached by Lingering Fragrance Peak. Let's see how you can wait and see. So what? Is there still a Misty School in Jianghu today? If they didn't pass the test, how could they become the chief disciple of my Misty School? Do you think it was easy for Zhang Qingyue to be the Misty School's disciple? Not to mention that the two of them were the same as Wenwen Hai. They didn't really understand the Lingering Fragrance Peak's headmaster's intentions and were only making wild guesses. However, when Zhang Xiaohu returned to the small courtyard and didn't see Zhang Xiaohua in the room, he felt strange in his heart. This child, she couldn't have run away just like that. -4. Chapter 822. How could Zhang Xiaohua leave without saying goodbye? At this time, she was saying goodbye to Oyen, Qiu Tong, and the others in the Huanxi mountain villa behind Shixin Peak. Oyen was cured by Zhang Xiaohua last time, and there were no more accidents. Within a few months, she had recovered a lot. Her face was slightly chubbier, and her smiling eyes were more charming. You are lucky to be able to save the inner sect alchemy disciple of Lingering Fragrance Peak. This disciple is also very considerate. Not only did she give you a martial arts cultivation method perfunctorily, but she also sent you to Lingering Fragrance Peak. Well, although she is only an alchemy disciple and not a real inner sect disciple, after all, she has reached the sky in a single bound. Yen said with a smile. Before Yen finished speaking, Qiu Tong next to her mocked. How is this reaching the sky in a single bound? It is simply 3 levels in a row. Zhang Xiaohua was stunned, and then she understood. First, she was the little medicine boy of Misty Hall, then the disciple on duty at Shixin Peak of Pill Spreading Hall, and now she was an inner sect alchemy disciple. Wasn't she rising 3 levels in a row? Sister Qiu Tong, don't make fun of me. Actually, I don't want to go. How good would it be to stay here with you? Ha ha ha. Qiu Tong was very happy to hear this and said, Xiaohua, forget it. Don't say these things that we like to hear. If you don't want to go, why did you come here to tell us? Hee hee. Zhang Xiaohua also smiled. I want to accompany you, but after thinking about it, There is nothing for me to do here. Mrs. Illness has already been cured, and there is no danger. My second brother also has his own things to do. Rather than this, when he spoke up to hear, Zhang Xiaohua's expression turned slightly cold, and he said, "Instead of that, I might as well make a trip to Lingering Fragrance Peak and give them a chance to repay kindness and resentment." Seeing Zhang Xiaohua like this, Yan understood that the former Deputy Hall Chief Zhang was ruthless to Zhang Xiaohu. Although Zhao Jian had been executed, Zhao Jian could also be said to be a scapegoat. The one who really ordered to torture Zhang Xiaohu was Deputy Hall Chief Zhang. And that day, the messenger of Lingering Fragrance Peak, Qin Qin, directly brought Zhong Pei back to Lingering Fragrance Peak, without giving Zhang Xiaohua any chance to kill him. Zhang was very upset that Zhong had always lived a carefree life. But where was Lingering Fragrance Peak? That was the head of the Lingering Fragrance sect. Any ordinary disciple would not have the chance to get close to it. Even if Zhang Xiaohua had the inheritance of the immortal path and had some success in cultivation, if she really attacked Lingering Fragrance Peak alone, there might not be any good results. And this time, Zhang Xiaohua gave Zhang Xiaohua a very good opportunity. Although Zhang Xiaohua might not be able to find Zhong Pei easily, it was a mountain peak after all. If Zhang Xiaohua was diligent in searching, there would definitely be a harvest. Didn't the ancients say, "Don't be afraid of thieves stealing, but be afraid of thieves remembering"? Therefore the corners of Yan's mouth rose and said, "Of course, it is revenge, but you also have to do things that are within your ability to do. Don't let others find out that you didn't do your own things well. That wouldn't be good. Although I have not been to Lingering Fragrance Peak, I heard that all the inner disciples are there. Who can guarantee that it is not a dragon's pool or a tiger's den? Although your martial arts are good and you have an unpredictable qigong. But compared to the 10,000 years of inheritance of the Lingering Fragrance sect, you are really insignificant." Zhang Xiaohua rubbed her nose and said, "Young miss, Big Sister Qiutong is attacking me, but you are not encouraging me. If you continue to say this, I really don't dare to go." Without waiting for Yan to speak, Elder Yu laughed. "Inner sect alchemy disciple? Probably refining pills. Zhang Xiaohua, if you succeed in Lingering Fragrance Peak, don't forget about us. The next time you see young miss, you have to arrange some pills." When Zhang Xiaohua heard Elder Yu's words, he also turned his head and said, "Elder Yu, now that you mention it, I really do remember. Let's not talk about the pills first. Where's the sword manual I gave you last time? Isn't it time to return it to me?" Hearing Zhang Xiaohua mention this matter, Elder Yu's face turned red and he said, "Xiaohua, it's not that I don't want to return it to you, but there's a part of it that I haven't fully comprehended. I can't use it smoothly, so for the time being, I can't return it to you." After he finished speaking, Elder Yu felt that it was inappropriate, and he added, If you insist on taking it, I will return it to you." As he spoke, he reached out to take it. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and pressed Elder Yu's hand. She smiled and said, "I have no use for this sword manual anyway. How about this? After you finish comprehending it, you can return the sword manual to my second brother and impart this set of sword techniques to him. How about that?" That's great. Although I don't know how talented your second brother is, this old man will reluctantly do it. Elder Yu was delighted when he heard this and immediately agreed. Qiutong thought for a moment and said, "Zhang Xiaohua, young miss is fine during this period of time, but it doesn't mean that the culprit won't appear in the future. If you go to Lingering Fragrance Peak and something happens to young miss, Qiutong, Yan reprimanded. "Xiaohua has her own matters to attend to. If something happens to me, don't I still have the Lingering Fragrance Peak's inner court physician?" But Qiutong felt wronged and said, "Zhang Xiaohua is one of us after all. It's convenient to use her. Furthermore, didn't Xiaohua cure the illness that even the Lingering Fragrance Peak's divine physician couldn't? That's right, young miss. Big Sister Qiutong is right. In the future, if there's anything you need me for, please tell me immediately. Even if I'm at Lingering Fragrance Peak, I'll still rush back to show myself to you. Zhang Xiaohua said very sincerely. You've already gone to Lingering Fragrance Peak. How are we going to find you? Qiu Tong asked. Zhang Xiaohua looked at Elder Yu and said, Elder Yu's acting last time was not bad. Next time, let him do it again. The older the ginger, the spicier it is. He will definitely have a way. Pei, Elder Yu spat and said, The two of you are always thinking about young Mrs. Shortcomings. I can't wait to not see Zhang Xiaohua again. After chatting for a while, Zhang Xiaohua looked at the sky and cupped her hands to bid farewell. From the beginning to the end, she did mention that Zhang Xiaohu was appointed as the disciple of Elder Jingxian of Lingering Fragrance Peak. Perhaps it was because Yan never wanted to hear about Misty Hall's matters. Or perhaps it was because Zhang Xiaohua also wanted to go to Lingering Fragrance Peak to see if this Elder Jingxian was the Shirtai that she knew. When Zhang Xiaohua arrived at Zhang Xiaohu's courtyard, Zhang Xiaohu was sitting cross-legged on the bed. Although he looked like he was cultivating, his eyes were staring blankly at the windowsill, as if he was thinking about something. Second brother? Zhang Xiaohua called out softly. Oh, Zhang Xiaohu was stunned for a moment before he recovered and asked, I thought you would come directly. Where did you go? Zhang Xiaohua didn't answer him and asked, It doesn't matter where I went. What are you thinking about? What are you thinking about? Zhang Xiaohu smiled bitterly. Isn't it just the decree of Lingering Fragrance Peak's hierarch? I thought about it for a long time, but couldn't think of anything. This is really a pie that fell from the sky. What did Hero Win and Martial Ancestor Li say? Zhang Xiaohua asked with concern. What can they say? Everyone doesn't understand why the hierarch would pass such a decree. But since it doesn't conflict with being a disciple of the Misty School, there is nothing unacceptable. Zhang Xiaohu still had a bitter smile on his face. Tell me, Little Blossom, Lord Sectmaster, why would we send such a decree? Zhang Xiaohua shrugged and said with a smile, How would I know? However, I know that no matter what second brother chooses, I will support him. Hee. Yes, you are now an inner disciple of alchemy. You can be considered to have made a name for yourself in spreading fragrance cult. Zhang Xiaohua curled his lips and said with a smile, Do you think I care about the identity of an inner disciple of alchemy? Forget it. It's up to you whether you want to go or not. Emissary Mu said it well. If you go to Lingering Fragrance Peak, don't forget the person who gave you this opportunity. Hee, I saw the female disciple who winked at you. She is quite fair. Damn, Zhang Xiaohua said angrily. Zhang Pinger and I are purely senior brother and junior sister. Senior brother, junior sister. Zhang Xiaohu sniffed and said, The inner disciples of Spreading Fragrance cult all call each other senior sister. You are good. You directly call each other junior sister. Who would believe that you are purely related? Xiaohua, don't forget the first rule of Spreading Fragrance cult. When the time comes, don't set a trap for yourself. Zhang Xiaohua was not a fool. Of course, he saw Zhang Pinger's expression in Misty Hall and also the meaning behind Emissary Mu's words. However, this kind of matter, if it was not clear, how could he answer? He believed that if he played the fool in front of Emissary Mu, he would be immediately arrested and punished according to the first rule of Spreading Fragrance cult. Oh, right, second brother. Zhang Xiaohua seemed to have thought of something and asked, How much do you know about this Elder Jingxian? What does she look like? 6 years ago, was she in Spreading Fragrance cult? From your tone, you have seen Elder Jingxian? Zhang Xiaohu also said curiously, I have never heard of this elder's name. Moreover, I only heard from Hall Leader Yang today that she had passed away. How could you know about her movements 6 years ago? I can't say that I know her. I have also seen a nun called Jingxian. However, that person's martial arts should be quite high. How could she have died so quickly? Moreover, this Spreading Fragrance cult only opens once every 2 years. How could Jingxian appear outside of Spreading Fragrance cult? However, Zhang Xiaohua herself was somewhat unconvinced about the last reason. counting with her fingers. The year Zhang Xiaohua met Shirtai was the year when the prohibition of spreading fragrance cult was loosened. Moreover, with Shirtai's lightness skill, it would not be very difficult for her to reach that small town. Perhaps there are too many people with the same name in this world. Zhang Xiaohu thought about his own matters and also paid attention to Zhang Xiaohua's words. He said, "Even Qin, doesn't he also have two?" Then, "Second brother, you don't plan to go to Lingxiang Peak, right? I thought I could go with you." The leader's decree only said that if you don't want to be, then you can return the token. Since I have become a registered disciple, of course, I don't need to go to Lingxiang Peak anymore. -4. Chapter 8:23. In fact, there was another thing that Zhang Xiaohua wanted to do in Lingxiang Peak. He did not tell Zhang Xiaohu. Firstly, the fewer people who knew about this, the better. Secondly, if he told Zhang Xiaohu, he would definitely be stopped by him. Maybe he would even worry about him. As for whether Zhang Xiaohu would be a registered disciple of Lingxiang Peak or a direct disciple of Misty School, Zhang Xiaohua did not care. His second brother's choice was his choice. The only thing he could do was to support him. "Oh, that's right. Little flower, the medicinal pills you gave me aren't enough. Don't let the Misty Mountain Villa's disciples be unable to recover their martial arts. This isn't good. You have to finish what you started." Seeing that his second brother was so concerned about the disciples of Misty School, Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "It won't be less. It's just for a few days." Then she thought for a moment and said, "Second brother, after I leave, there will be other disciples to take over the task of pill-expanding hall. Qin has the token of Lingxiang Peak in her hand. Maybe she can use it to intimidate others. Your ethereal hull can't always compromise like this." "Hee, Xiaohua, you've hit the nail on the head. To tell you the truth, I didn't know the trick before. Now that I know, and I can also make some contributions to the ethereal hull, why not? Even if you didn't say it, I was going to do it." Zhang Xiaohua narrowed her eyes and said, "Yes, who is Qin? Isn't she just your junior sister? It's okay to use her, but also to accumulate popularity for your second brother." Zhang Xiaohu smiled and didn't say anything. But he didn't know if this thing that could be understood but not expressed in words referred to Qin, or to accumulate popularity for Zhang Xiaohu. Also, if your Misty Hall really needs any elixirs, you don't have to exchange them with the pill-expanding hall. Second brother, if it's convenient for you, just take those herbs and leave them to me. Anyway, I'm also a disciple of Lingering Fragrance Peak, so I still have some means. Isn't it more practical than the pill-expanding hall? My younger brother, well said. Then we won't trade with the Pill Tower Hall anymore, and we'll trade directly with you. How about it? Of course. Zhang Xiaohua grinned and said, "If you want to tire your younger brother to death and let the disciples of Lingering Fragrance Peak investigate your Misty Hall, fine." Zhang Xiaohu waved his hand. "Just pretend I didn't say anything." Then he put on the face of an elder brother and asked warmly, "Xiaohua, you've grown up. What's your future?" Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohua almost fainted. It seemed that her second brother had begun to use her as a target to practice his eloquence before he got a position in the Misty Hall. 3 days later, on the top of Shirxin Peak, Zhang Xiaohua refined the last batch of bone solidifying pills and meridian smoothing pills very easily. She pulled out a total of 54 elixirs, and the corresponding small bone solidifying pill and crimson flame pill were pitifully few. Well, finally it's a success. Zhang Xiaohua put the elixirs into the jade bottle with satisfaction, clapped her hands, and smiled. For the disciples of Misty School, I, Xiaoxia, have lost a lot of money. I don't know when I can make up for this deficit. Tell me, if I ask my second brother to give me the 4 carriages of licorice roots, will he agree? Zhang Xiaohua said to herself. She didn't know who the you was. Zhang Xiaohua put away the 8 trigrams purple gold furnace from the 2 alchemy rooms together and put away all the other miscellaneous items. He looked at the alchemy room where he usually lived and shook his head slightly. He thought to himself, Could it be that I have to live in all the alchemy rooms of the 19 peaks? When Zhang Xiaohua arrived at Zhang Xiaohu's small courtyard, Tianshu, Chang'e, and Qin were all sitting in the room. They had been informed by Zhang Xiaohu that Zhang Xiaohua would leave Shixin Peak today, so they all came to see her off. Seeing the room full of people, Zhang Xiaohua pushed the door open and smiled. The sun is shining in the sky, and the flowers are smiling at me. Everyone is really in a good mood, waiting to see me off. No one was surprised that Zhang Xiaohua came in so quietly. Only Qin was a little unhappy. Zhang Xiaohua, we are all sad that you're leaving. Look at you, you seem to be very happy. Zhang Xiaohua looked at everyone and said, It's not like we won't meet again. Everyone is in the Chuanxiang cult, so there will be opportunities to meet. And if I don't go to Yixiang Peak, how can I find a chance to sneak out when the prohibition of Dinchi Lake is open the year after next? After all, there are many things in Jianghu. Hearing Zhang Xiaohua say things in Jianghu, Zhang Xiaohu's expression was a little gloomy. Although he was living well here, even better than when he was in the Misty School, his parents didn't know. With his martial arts, it was almost impossible to hide from the eyes and ears of the Chuanxiang cult and return to Jianghu. He could only rely on his younger brother. He was used to living a comfortable life, so he didn't think of this. It was really... Although Tianshu and the others didn't quite understand the meaning, they just smiled and didn't ask. Chang'e said, Yixiang Peak is not like Tuodenhall and Shixin Peak. That is the territory of the inner disciples. It can be said that there are hidden dragons and crouching tigers. Xiaohua, you have to be careful. Don't force yourself to stand out. As the saying goes, endure a moment of anger, avoid 100 days of worry. You are now at the age where you are hot-blooded and impulsive. When you do anything, you have to think of your second brother who is far away here, and there are many people who miss you. If you are impulsive, you are killed by the inner disciples of Yixiang Peak. Then, that's right, Zhang Xiaohua, you must remember senior sister's words. Last time, I heard from Lingering Fragrance Peak's Qin that the inner sect disciples are very powerful. They can kill you like killing an ant. You must be careful, Qin said with concern. At this time, Qin had already forgotten the scene when she saw Zhang Xiaohua's incredible supernatural power. She only wanted to say a few more words in exchange for Zhang Xiaohua's safety in the future. Haha. Zhang Xiaohua's heart warmed when he heard this, but there was also a trace of disdain. He was very clear about the martial arts of Peacock and Qin of Lingxiang Peak. If all the inner disciples were at this level, then he could easily go to Lingxiang Peak. The only thing he was worried about was the sect leader, elders, and masters. Besides, what was he going to do there? Refine elixirs. Well, he was going to help his second brother vent his anger and kill Zhong Pei cruelly. Besides this, there was nothing worth risking his life for. As for leaving Yixiang Peak, that would have to wait until the year after next. Zhang Xiaohua narrowed his eyes, picked his ears, and said with a smile, Why do these words sound so familiar? Qin asked curiously, What is familiar? Zhang Xiaohua raised his head and pretended to think. After a while he said, It seems that when I left home, sister-in-law kept talking in my ear. Chang'e and Qin both blushed. Zhang Xiaohu stepped forward and patted him on the shoulder. Don't talk nonsense. Where are the things you want to leave behind? Zhang Xiaohua said with a smile, It has been prepared long ago. Well, you come with me. Zhang Xiaohu spoke with the dignity of a chief disciple. The two walked into the inner room. Zhang Xiaohua took out several jade bottles and said, These are the remaining 54 bone solidifying pills and 54 meridian nourishing pills. It is enough for the disciples of Ethereal Villa. There are also some small bone solidifying pills and crimson flame pills. Well, I gave a lot to second brother before. I know. I have kept them. That's good. Second brother, you must know that these pills can repair the dantian, moisten the meridians, and also improve the internal force. Sister Chang'e, Chun Chen, Du Feng, and Ding Chao are examples. So, you should be careful when you use them. After treating the disciples of Ethereal Villa, you must have a lot of pills left. These pills can bring benefits to you, but they can also bring harm to you. You must use them well and carefully. Well, now is not the time to use them. I have to improve my martial arts to a certain level first. Then I can use them slowly. Zhang Xiaohu had already come up with a solution and said unhurriedly, "Also, second brother, in fact, I wanted to help you improve your internal force after Shirxin Peak. But I didn't expect that your dantian would be broken by that bastard Zhao Jian which caused such twists and turns. For the time being, I can't help you with this skill. Let's wait for a chance in the future. Although that bastard Zhao Jian is sinister and wants to make me lose my internal force, I didn't expect that he would help me. If it wasn't for him, how could you cultivate the ethereal divine art for 20 to 30 years? How could I cultivate two types of internal force with two completely different attributes? That's right. Second brother is blessed with good fortune. How can ordinary people hurt you? Although I can't see second brother's dantian and can't know the specific progress of your cultivation, I can see your progress in this period of time from your movements. You really do have the demeanor of a great master. Xiaohua, you are flattering a little. My master's demeanor is the real demeanor. Second brother, isn't a chief disciple like you used to be a trophy? Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, Hero when originally had the demeanor of a great master. Now he is even more dignified. If we are talking about demeanor, it is still martial ancestrally. To be honest, if I didn't know that his internal force had recovered, I wouldn't be able to see any clues from the surface. Oh, right, second brother, you must be careful. Don't let the disciples of Lingering Fragrance Peak discover this secret. Otherwise, I will really destroy this Lingering Fragrance Peak. TSK, Zhang Xiaohu smiled and patted his shoulder again. You just need to take good care of yourself. We are all adults, you don't need to worry. Your second sister-in-law is right. You are still young and have little experience. There are many things that you need to think about carefully. Don't just casually fight and kill. Lingering Fragrance Peak is a deep pool. If you are not careful, you will be eaten until not even your bones are left. Gosh, second brother, what you said is so scary. Look at Lingering Fragrance Peak's Chin Chin. He is also a reasonable person. Oh, right, second brother, that sword manual of yours. Elder, you hasn't fully understood it. When he has finished reading it, he will return it to you. I knew that this would happen. No hurry, I haven't accepted a disciple anyway. The two of them talked for a while and came out. Tianshu also held Zhang Xiaohua's hand. Although he still didn't know that his injuries were healed by Zhang Xiaohua, he was reluctant to part with him when he saw that he was about to leave. -4. Chapter 824. When Zhang Xiaohua went down the mountain, there was only Huan Huan, who was carrying the great wisdom sword on her back, and there were only a few people from the Misty Hall who saw her off. Only Du Feng, Xiao Binghe, and Mu Tangchun. Needless to say, Du Feng was in charge of the elixir trade in the Misty Hall. He was also quite close to Zhang Xiaohua, so it was reasonable for him to give him a gift. As for Xiao Binghe and Mu Tangchun, it could be said that they got to know each other after a fight. Although Zhang Xiaohua had a bit of a bad reputation in the Shirxin Peak, which young man would not show mercy. Zhang Xiaohua was just talking and didn't do anything, right? Xiao Binghe and Mu Tangchun admired Zhang Xiaohua's martial arts, and they were also convinced by his means of flirting with female disciples. So they went to find Zhang Xiaohua several times to ask for advice. Unfortunately, our Xiaoxia had been busy treating the disciples of the Misty School, and had devoted himself to the grand plan of refining elixirs. So how could he be willing to stay in this secluded courtyard of the pill-expanding hall? Their goal of humbly asking for advice had failed several times. Looking at the three people who sent her off, Zhang Xiaohua curled her lips. In this Shirxin Peak, there were men and women. Well, especially the female disciples who had received her favor. However, this halo was worn by Zhang Xiaohu, so it was not convenient for Zhang Xiaohu and the others to send her directly, so there was no need to mention the legendary all-people's umbrella. Walking on the mountain road, Zhang Xiaohua cupped her hands and smiled. Seeing you off for 1,000 miles, we have to part in the end. The three of you, thank you for remembering my departure today. Du Feng curled his lips and secretly said, You didn't come to tell me yesterday. How? How could I remember? But he smiled and said, Junior Brother Rin has been promoted from a disciple of the Pill Expanding Hall to an inner disciple. We have witnessed such a glorious moment. So how can we not be happy for Junior Brother Rin? How can we not be proud to know Junior Brother Rin? As he spoke, he took out a jade box from his bosom and handed it over, saying, This is a 200-year-old ice grass. Deputy Hall Master Chin asked me to bring it to you. She has something to do today and can't come. She asked me to bring her sincere greetings and heartfelt thanks. Thank you for your support and help in the past few months at Shershin Peak. She also hopes that in the future, when you are an inner sect alchemist disciple at Lingering Fragrance Peak, if you have the opportunity, you can help our Misty Hall more. Zhang Xiaohua grabbed the jade box and thought, It's not easy for me. I've done so much for the Misty Hall, but my second brother isn't even willing to give me a single herb. Vice Hall Master Chin is so considerate. She stuffed the jade box into her bosom and said with a smile, Well said, well said. Lu Qiaogang and Mu Tangchun were also envious. This was a legendary spirit grass that they had never seen before. Seeing the two little guys like this, Zhang Xiaohua patted his head and took out 3 jade bottles from his bosom. He handed them to the three and said with a smile, The three of you, I don't have anything on me that can be used as a souvenir. Fortunately, I am a member of the Pill Tower Hall. I don't have anything else, but these pills can be considered as a gift. All right, these 3 bottles of blood-replenishing pills can be considered as a souvenir. She stuffed the bottles into the hands of the 3 of them. Du Feng and the others were already happy when they saw Zhang Xiaohua taking out the pills from her bosom. But when they heard that these were just ordinary blood-replenishing pills, they complained in their hearts. Du Feng was even more so. He knew how much benefit Zhang Xiaohua had gained from the transaction. When he saw Zhang Xiaohua stuffing the bottles into his hands, he could only say with a sad face, Thank you, Junior Brother Rin, for your generous gift. He emphasized the word generous. Xiao Binghe and Mu Tangchun also looked at each other and said in a low voice, Thank you, Senior Brother Rin, for your blood-replenishing pills. The 3 words, blood-replenishing pills, were also emphasized. Zhang Xiaohua laughed heartily. These were blood-replenishing pills that he had personally refined using immortal techniques. How could they be ordinary? He didn't explain and only raised his hand and said, Don't mention it, senior brothers. The green mountains will not change, and the green water will flow forever. We will meet again someday. As he spoke, he floated over. Huan Huan let out a low hiss, raised her hooves, and dashed towards the center of the mountain path. Only Du Feng and the other 2 were left wiping their sweat by the mountain path. The 3 of them thought at the same time, The following sentence is really similar to the words of the mountain bandits. However, before they could wipe the sweat off their heads, they saw Zhang Xiaohua's figure returning. The 3 of them looked at each other. Du Feng stepped forward and said, Junior Brother Rin, did you leave something behind? Zhang Xiaohua said awkwardly that, I didn't. I just have something to ask. Du Feng smiled and said, What is it? As long as it doesn't involve the secrets of my Misty Hall, I will tell you everything I know. This. Zhang Xiaohua was still hesitant. After a while, she said embarrassedly, I don't know the route to Lingering Fragrance Peak. Senior Brother Du, please tell me. Bang! 3 consecutive sounds were heard. The 3 people who were sending her off all fell to the ground. The morning sun had just risen. The red clouds were like faint flames, spraying on the many white clouds. In the middle of a seemingly flat valley on the open ground, there was a sudden ripple in the air. The air around 10 feet around the ripple also trembled. It was as if a layer of bright cover had been lifted. From within, a thin and tall youth and a David's deer with a long sword on its back appeared. The youth's figure flashed. Without any delay, he clenched his fists and practiced a set of fist techniques. The fist technique was practiced over and over again until the sun rose for a while. Only then did he stop. The youth could be heard muttering to himself. The comprehension of the heavenly Tao is indeed amazing. This karma Tao is only at the beginning, but it can actually promote the advancement of the Big Dipper magical fist technique. These 12 paths of circulation have tempered the bones twice, and then the young man rubbed his chin with a puzzled look on his face. Tempering the bones. It seems that other than a huge increase in strength, there aren't any other effects. What is this Big Dipper mystical fist for? Wasn't this youth Zhang Xiaohua, who went to Lingering Fragrance Peak to become an inner disciple of alchemy? The origin of Zhang Xiaohua's Big Dipper magical fist technique was very strange. He found it from various fist techniques. As for what it was used for, Zhang Xiaohua didn't know. Back then, when Peng asked Zhang Xiaohua to copy the fist technique, he didn't tell Zhang Xiaohua what the fist technique was used for. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohua practiced it every day. Other than having great strength and a lighter body, he couldn't think of any other effects. After pondering for a long time, Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "Since leader thinks it's good, what is there for me to worry about? The delusion breaker magic, I can only see things related to the chi of heaven and earth. It can even see my bones. This kind of tempering is of course useful. I'll just cultivate. The result will be known sooner or later." Zhang Xiaohua leaned on the David's deer and patted Huanhuan's bald horn. They left the valley and went straight to the mountain path not far away. That day, Zhang Xiaohua asked Du Feng about the location of Lingering Fragrance Peak. But how could the 3 people from Misty Hall know? Zhang Xiaohua had no choice but to go down Shishing Peak and ask the disciple of Lingering Fragrance Peak, who was guarding at the foot of the mountain. Coincidentally, that disciple was the one who came with Zhang Xiaohua to Shishing Peak. When he saw Zhang Xiaohua riding down alone on the David's deer, he scolded him and said that he didn't listen to Zhang Xiaohua's words that day. Zhang Xiaohua looked at this unfamiliar disciple and had an indescribable feeling in her heart. She didn't know him and was just a little medicine boy of Pill Expanding Hall. He didn't have to say so much to her. However, not only did he remind her when she went up the mountain, he also scolded her when she went down the mountain. He didn't treat her as an outsider. Although his scolding was unpleasant to hear, it was for her own good. Moreover, from that disciple's scolding, he must have scolded many disciples in the past. When Zhang Xiaohua asked about the route to Lingering Fragrance Peak, the disciple pointed out the route that Zhang Xiaohua took from Pill Expanding Hall. When Zhang Xiaohua asked about Lingering Fragrance Peak again, that disciple was even more vigilant. Seeing that he was glaring at her, like a tiger watching its prey, Zhang Xiaohua had no choice but to take out her token. Knowing that Zhang Xiaohua was now an inner alchemy disciple of Lingering Fragrance Peak, the disciple's face relaxed and he narrated the route to Lingering Fragrance Peak in detail. Zhang Xiaohua also took the opportunity to ask about it. Sure enough, that disciple actually had the same thought as Zhang Xiaohua. As long as it was a disciple who went up the mountain, whether it was Pill Expanding Hall, Qingkuan Hall, or Shuyu Hall, he would warn and scold them. Zhang Xiaohua was speechless. When she asked why, that disciple just scratched his head and said, "We are all disciples of Lingering Fragrance Cult. This kind of internal strife will only cause trouble. The disciples of Misty Hall are new and have slowly become brothers. If we start a feud now, it won't be easy to resolve it in the future." These simple words caused Zhang Xiaohua to raise his eyebrows. He would never have thought that an ordinary inner sect disciple would have such a high level of awareness. He could not help but be a little wary of the Lingering Fragrance Peak that he was about to go to. Following the path that the disciple had pointed out, Zhang Xiaohua had walked at a moderate pace for 2 days. When she woke up today, she walked out of the depression and walked along the mountain path for another half a day. She saw that this mountain peak was different from all the other peaks that Zhang Xiaohua had seen before. Although this mountain peak was also lush with trees and springs, the qi of heaven and earth was weaker by 30%. The soil and rocks were mostly brown. Zhang Xiaohua looked around and saw that there weren't many herbs that were commonly seen growing on this mountain peak. Is this floating mound peak? Is this where Qinquan Hall is located? Zhang Xiaohua sat on Huanhuan's back and raised her head to look at the towering mountain peak. She couldn't help but smile. This smile was a common expression that Zhang Xiaohua would have whenever she saw an opportunity to take advantage of something. That's right. Zhang Xiaohua still had the token that Elder Sage had given her. Yang Yao had said that with this token, she could obtain a divine weapon from the Hall of Heaven and Earth. Although Zhang Xiaohua didn't covet this divine weapon, a fly was still meat. There was no reason for her to reject it. Furthermore, she didn't know when this token would expire. If she remembered it in the future and couldn't redeem it, then Zhang Xiaohua would be heartbroken. Therefore, when she heard from the disciple that she could pass by Floating Mound Peak, even though it would take 2 more days, she still took the long way around and rushed over to take advantage of this opportunity. -4. Chapter 825. It had already been several months since the secluded orchid dusk refinement, and the heavenly hall was not the misty hall, so there was naturally no one guarding the path up the mountain. When Zhang Xiaohua arrived halfway up the mountain and saw a large number of houses and courtyards similar to the ones on Tianmu Peak, a disciple walked over, raised his hand and shouted, "Junior brother, which peak are you from? What business do you have with my Floating Mound Peak?" Upon seeing this, Zhang Xiaohua also got off the carriage, cupped his hands, and said, "I am Ren Xiaoyao, a disciple of the Grass Division of the Pill Expanding Hall. Here is a token given by the Hall Master, saying that it can be exchanged for a weapon in our heavenly hall." "Look!" That disciple was stunned and looked at Zhang Xiaohua from head to toe, stretched out his hand and asked, "Where is the token?" Zhang Xiaohua took out the token from his chest and handed it over. That disciple took the token and looked it up and down, slightly frowning. He raised his eyes to look at Zhang Xiaohua and asked, "Where is your waist token?" Waist token? Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. To be honest, he really did not have the waist token of the Pill Expanding Hall. He did have the waist token of an inner court disciple, but the token in his hand was given by the Pill Expanding Hall. If he took out this identity token, people would think that he had taken a detour to get a weapon on the way to Lingering Fragrance Peak. Speaking of which, it would be a little embarrassing. Wouldn't it be shameful for his pride as an inner court disciple? After thinking for a while, Zhang Xiaohua took out the Pill Expanding Hall token given by Old Man Zixin and said with a smile, "I am only a disciple of the Grass Division of the Pill Expanding Hall. Where did I get this waist token from? This is the token given by the Hall Master. Take a look and see if it is useful." That disciple was even more surprised. It wasn't as if there weren't any people who came to ask for something with a token. But Zhang Xiaohua was one of the rare few who came with a token and no token. It wasn't too complicated. Most people with some status in Chuanqiang cult, such as Qinfeng Xiao from Tianmu Peak, Wu Zhou, and even Yang Yao from Baiyu Peak, had their own tokens. They would show it to others to let others know where they came from. After all, they couldn't just say who they were. As for the tokens of the Heavenly Hall, not to mention that the tokens themselves were divided into different grades and grades. Even the lowest grade was precious. Normally, which hall master would not reward those who had made some meritorious contributions to the hall? How could these people be ordinary disciples like Zhang Xiaohua without a waist token? Even if these ordinary disciples had made contributions, it would be due to the contributions of the leaders of the higher-ups. Naturally, it was impossible for them to receive such a token from the Universal Hall. Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua had taken out the Pill Repository Hall's token, the disciple actually believed him. He couldn't help but grumble in his heart. What a lucky bastard. How many years has it been since I last met someone like him? Then he smiled and said, "Junior brother Rin, please tie your mount here and follow me in." Zhang Xiaohua did as she was told and followed the disciple into the Universal Hall. The layout of the Universal Hall was similar to the pill-expanding hall in Bayou Peak. There were many disciples here, but their attire was different. Every disciple had their own matters to attend to, so when they saw a disciple bringing a stranger in, they didn't pay much attention and just hurried past. Zhang Xiaohua followed behind and asked carefully, "Senior brother, may I know your name?" That disciple chuckled and said, "You can just call me Senior Brother Zheng." "Oh, Senior Brother Zheng, it seems like your hall has more disciples than my pill-expanding hall. Moreover, all the senior brothers seem to be in a hurry and are very busy." Senior Brother Zheng's words seemed to have struck a chord in his heart. He looked at Zhang Xiaohua with interest and said with a smile, "Isn't that so? Which hall can compare to your pill-expanding hall? Planting medicinal herbs, refining pills, and living a carefree life? Furthermore, pills are the hard currency of our fragrant sect. Who doesn't want to curry favor with your pill-expanding hall?" As he spoke, he tossed the token in his hand a few times and said, "Otherwise, why would Junior Brother Rin bring this token to my Universal Hall?" Then he sighed and said, "Sai, you don't know that our Universal Hall is filled with miscellaneous tasks. We don't have the slightest sense of accomplishment. These tasks are troublesome and complicated, and it's extremely easy to make mistakes. My hall master is a cautious person and won't let go of any small mistakes. Look!" As he spoke, he pointed to the people beside him and said, "All the senior and junior brothers are very cautious, lest they make any mistakes." Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohua frowned inwardly. Could it be that Senior Brother Zheng has lost his mind? I was just asking him about the situation of the Heaven and Earth Hall out of politeness, but he actually told me so much and even spoke ill of their hall master. Is this the legendary old friend at first sight and heartfelt son? At this time, she heard Senior Brother Zheng say, "I really envy the disciples of your pill-expanding hall. You can casually plant herbs and refine pills, and you can get so many pills. Sigh, why did I choose Universal Hall back then? If I could go back in time, I would definitely go to Pill-Expanding Hall and be Junior Brother Ren's senior brother." Haha, Senior Brother Zheng is joking. Each hall has its own benefits. Our Pill-Expanding Hall's disciples envy you for going out once every 2 years. Forget it, don't mention it. You don't know how many disciples there are in our Universal Hall. When did we not turn the world upside down for these places? Sigh, back then, just to go out, I gave a lot of pills to the steward. As he spoke, he looked at Zhang Xiaohua very kindly. Sigh, it turns out to be so difficult. Zhang Xiaohua said sympathetically. Isn't it? It is difficult. Senior Brother Zheng continued to chatter. In fact, going out is also complicated and tiring. However, it is good to go out and have a look. It is quite enjoyable. What is there to see outside? It is much worse than the scenery of our fragrant hall. Junior Brother Ren went out before? Senior Brother Zheng was very surprised. No, I am just a medicine boy who came in from outside. Of course, I know the situation outside. Is that so? Senior Brother Zheng's gaze was a little strange. He continued, "Although the scenery of our fragrant hall is good, after all, we have seen it for a long time. How can we not be tired of it? Going out to see the different customs and scenery is also a kind of enjoyment." While they were talking, the two of them arrived in front of a rather large and spacious hall. Senior Brother Zheng pointed to a place at the side and said, "Junior Brother Ren, please wait here. I will go in and talk to the manager and see how he will deal with you." After all, Junior Brother Ren's keepsake. Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and asked curiously, "What's wrong with my keepsake? Is it not real?" Of course it is real. Forget it. I will go in and see what the steward has to say." Senior Brother Zheng then entered the hall, leaving Zhang Xiaohua outside. She thought to herself, "This keepsake was given to me by Yang Yao. He said that it was a gift from Hall Master Purple Ginseng. Yang Yao shouldn't be greedy and he wouldn't dare to. But why is there a problem with this keepsake?" Soon after, Zhang Xiaohua recalled the look of surprise on Senior Brother Zhang's face when he saw the keepsake. After a while, Senior Brother Zhang walked out with a smile. When he saw Zhang Xiaohua, he smiled and said, "Junior Brother Rin, it seems like you have to thank me." Why is that?" Zhang Xiaohua asked curiously. "Let's go. The steward has already approved it. Follow me, we will talk as we walk." With that, Senior Brother Zhang led Zhang Xiaohua inside. As he walked, he asked, "Was this token given to you by your hall master, Purple Ginseng?" "That's right." You must have made a great contribution to the pill expansion hall." It's just so. I was just lucky." Senior Brother Zhang held the keepsake in his hand and said with a smile, "Junior Brother Rin, you don't know the difference between the different grades of keepsake in our universal hall, right?" "Different grades?" Zhang Xiaohua was dumbfounded and hurriedly said, "Senior Brother Zhang, how would I know? Is my keepsake the lowest grade?" Senior Brother Zhang smiled and shook his head. It can't be." Hall Master Purple Ginseng's image in Zhang Xiaohua's heart instantly grew. Zhang Xiaohua definitely did not expect Hall Master Purple Ginseng to give him the highest grade keepsake. Her voice trembled a little as she said, "Senior Brother Zhang, it can't be the highest grade, right?" "Ha ha ha. Junior Brother Rin, you really know how to imagine. The highest grade allows you to take away any item in our universal hall. Do you think your hall master will give it to you?" Zhang Xiaohua was speechless. It was really impossible. Junior Brother Rin, the tokens of my Qinkuan hall are divided into different grades, and the items that can be taken away are also different. As I said just now, the highest grade token can take away any item in the 3 pavilions of my Qinkuan hall's treasure pavilion. As for the other tokens, they can enter different pavilions according to their grades. Moreover, even if it is the same treasure pavilion, the areas that can be entered are different. Zhang Xiaohua understood a little. She smiled and asked, "Then what grade is my keepsake?" "Which grade?" Senior Brother Zhang smiled mysteriously and said, "It's not of any grade." Then it's fake? Of course this keepsake is real." Senior Brother Zhang shook his head and said, "It's just that this keepsake was given by the previous hall master. Moreover, the previous hall master was demoted back to Lingering Fragrance Peak in a fit of anger because he gave out keepsakes indiscriminately. Your keepsake is one of the keepsakes given out by the previous hall master." Zhang Xiaohua was dumbfounded. Senior Brother Zhang continued, "Moreover, in order to distinguish the keepsakes given out by the previous hall master, the present Misty Hall's keepsakes have already been modified. They are different from the previous ones. But what about the keepsakes given out by the previous hall master?" Zhang Xiaohua was still concerned about her own affairs. Of course, the keepsakes given out by the previous hall master are valid. However, because of the previous hall master's crime, most of the keepsakes were voluntarily returned to our Misty Hall. They didn't play any role. There were some that were leaked out, but the number was very small. In these years, I haven't heard of any disciple coming to collect something with your keepsake. Speaking of this, Senior Brother Zhang rubbed his fingers and said, "So, Junior Brother Rin, you should still thank me." -4. Chapter 826. Senior Fellow Apprentice Zhang rubbed his fingers and said to Zhang Xiaohua, "So, Junior Brother Rin should still thank me. Although you are the first to come here with this kind of messy token, and our steward also wants to confiscate it directly and not let you take the weapon. How can this be? This is the reward I worked hard to earn." Zhang Xiaohua was a little indignant. She took a long detour. Didn't she just want to take advantage of it? This steward really doesn't understand the hard work of others. That's right, that's what I said too. If it was someone else, yes, someone with a waste token and status, I definitely wouldn't say these words. But Junior Brother Rin, it's obvious that you've risked your life for this reward. How can I let you down? Junior Brother Rin, didn't you watch me go in for a long time? I have been explaining to the steward there, and it took me a lot of effort to let him agree to let you go to the human pavilion to pick a weapon you like. Tell me, Junior brother Ren, shouldn't you thank me? Hearing senior fellow apprentice Zhang say, shouldn't you thank me, again, Zhang Xiaohua slapped her forehead. No, he asked her about her treatment in the pill repository hall from the beginning. And he also complained about the bitterness of the Qingkuan hall. Wasn't his purpose to let her express something? As for what the steward said when he entered the hall, how he said it, and whether what he said was true or not, it was no longer important. The important thing was that she took a token that was messy before and came to the Qingkuan hall to collect the weapon. Senior fellow apprentice Zhang persuaded the steward earnestly to let her get what she wanted. She should thank senior fellow apprentice Zhang. As for how to thank him, do you still need others to teach you? After Zhang Xiaohua understood, she smiled. Seeing that there was no one around, she took out a bottle of spirit congealing pills that she had previously obtained in the Timu Peak, handed it over, and whispered, I was wondering, it turned out to be senior fellow apprentice Zhang's effort. Senior fellow apprentice Zhang helped me. How can I let senior fellow apprentice Zhang work for nothing? This is a bottle of spirit congealing pills produced by my pill repository hall. Please accept it. As soon as senior fellow apprentice Zhang heard it, he beamed with joy, but then his face was slightly angry. He pointed to the spirit congealing pills and said, Junior brother Ren, what are you doing? I have always been a righteous person, and I can't rub sand in my eyes. I helped you because you really deserve it. I am not greedy for your small gains. Take it back. If that's the case, I will be angry. This. Seeing senior fellow apprentice Zhang's righteous words, Zhang Xiaohua hesitated unconsciously. Did I see it wrong? Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua was a little hesitant, senior fellow apprentice Zhang was a little anxious, and his footsteps also slowed down. Zhang Xiaohua thought for a while and decided to try it one last time. She stuffed the spirit congealing pills into senior fellow apprentice Zhang's hands again and said with a smile, In fact, with senior fellow apprentice Zhang's help to me, I should take better and more medicinal pills to express my gratitude. However, I came in a hurry today and I was just passing by, so the amount I brought with me is extremely limited. This little bit of medicinal pills, just take it as a small token of my appreciation. This. Senior fellow apprentice Zhang was extremely embarrassed. He also hesitated for a moment and sighed. Well, seeing your sincerity, if I don't accept it, you will feel uneasy in your heart. Just accept it, and you can rest assured. Remember, don't do it again. As he said, he put the spirit congealing pills into his arms very skillfully. Zhang Xiaohua secretly despised him in her heart, but still said, Yes, I won't dare to do it again next time. When senior fellow apprentice Zhang heard this, he understood and said with a smile, Haha, if junior brother Rin comes next time, just look for me directly. There is nothing in the Misty Hall that I can't do. While talking, they came to a rather large courtyard. Through the high walls, they saw 3 tall pavilions inside. They must be the heaven, earth, and mortal treasure pavilions of the Universal Hall. Sure enough, when senior fellow apprentice Zhang and Zhang Xiaohua came over, the guard in front of the courtyard immediately stopped them and shouted, Where did this disciple come from? Why haven't you taken out your waist token? Senior fellow apprentice Zhang stepped forward with a smile and handed over his waist token and Zhang Xiaohua's token, and said with a smile, This one is Zheng Yi. I was sent by Steward Li to bring this little brother from the pill expanding hall to the treasure pavilion to pick up a weapon. The guard took the waist token and looked at it before returning it to Zheng Yi and retreating. When Zhang Xiaohua saw this, she couldn't help but whisper to herself, Didn't they say that it was a random token? Doesn't this guard know? At this moment, Zheng Yi turned around and smiled. Junior brother Rin, quickly follow this one in. You don't have much time. Don't have much time? What does that mean? Zhang Xiaohua thought to herself strangely. Sure enough, when they entered the courtyard, they saw the 3 tall pavilions. Zhang Yi pointed to the one in the middle and said, Junior brother Rin, this is the Earth Pavilion. There are a total of 10 floors, and you can only go up to the 2nd floor. Quickly go in. You only have 2 hours to pick a weapon. If you don't pick a weapon in 2 hours, it will be taken as a forfeit. Oh, right. Even if junior brother Rin goes up to the 3rd floor, the weapons there are recorded. Even if you take it out, you won't be able to bring it out. Zhang Xiaohua asked curiously, Senior fellow apprentice Zhang, just now, didn't you say that I can only go up to the human pavilion? Zhang Yi smiled and blinked his eyes. Did I say that? Junior brother Rin, did you hear me say that I have a noble character? You must have made a mistake. Zhang Xiaohua also smiled and said, and that's right. Junior brother has indeed made a mistake. As she spoke, she didn't delay and stepped into the Earth Pavilion. There was no one guarding the outside of the Earth Pavilion, and there was no one inside. Zhang Xiaohua looked around and saw that the 1st floor of the Earth Pavilion was more than 10 feet in size. There were many shelves densely packed, similar to the ethereal villa's library in the past. However, the shelves were filled with different weapons. There were long swords, padao, spears, staffs, and so on. Zhang Xiaohua casually picked up a short sword and looked at it carefully. It was actually inferior to the jade water sword that she used in the past. She couldn't help but feel disheartened. Then, she didn't look at it carefully. She only released her divine sense and walked a few rounds around the 1st floor of the Earth Pavilion. After looking through the entire 1st floor of the Earth Pavilion, she didn't find any fluctuation of energy. Then, she lifted her leg and went up the stairs. The 2nd floor of the Earth Pavilion was the same as the 1st floor. The only difference was that the quality of the weapons was much better. Unfortunately, the improvement was too little. How could it enter Zhang Xiaohua's eyes? Even after using her divine sense, she still didn't find anything. What kind of rubbish is this? Zhang Xiaohua scolded disdainfully. If I had known, I wouldn't have taken such a long detour. As she thought about it, her eyes glanced at the stairs that led to the 3rd floor. Although Zhang, he only told me to go to the 2nd floor, and I can't take the weapons from the 2nd floor and above, he didn't say that I can't go up and take a look. As she thought about it, she walked up to the 3rd floor. Unfortunately, even when Zhang Xiaohua reached the 10th floor of the Earth Pavilion, she still didn't find anything good. There were no traces of any fluctuation of the energy of heaven and earth on the 10th floor of the Earth Pavilion. This time, Zhang Xiaohua was really depressed. Don't tell me I have to go back empty-handed? Once this thought arose, Zhang Xiaohua immediately thought of the Heaven Pavilion and the Human Pavilion. Hee, others can't go, but this Xiaoxia can. It's just taking a look, what's the big deal? I'll just take it as a look at the Heavenly Hall. When Zhang Xiaohua easily reached the Heaven Pavilion, he was shocked to discover that the Heaven Pavilion was much smaller. It was only a few dozen feet wide, and the layout was no different from the Earth Pavilion. The only difference was that the quality of the weapons on the shelves was much better. Moreover, most of the weapons were swords and sabers. Zhang Xiaohua didn't have the patience to take a closer look. After seeing that a few short swords were not as good as the jade water sword, she released her divine sense again and scanned the entire 1st floor of the Heaven Pavilion. Still, she didn't find anything. However, just as she was about to turn around a shelf and head up the stairs, her gaze suddenly fell on a pile of items in a corner. What's this? Zhang Xiaohua subconsciously walked over. The items in the treasury were all neat and tidy, so the sudden appearance of a pile of items was naturally very surprising. Before she reached it, Zhang Xiaohua first scanned the area with his divine sense, but didn't find anything out of the ordinary. When she got closer and squatted down to take a closer look, it was a mess of strange items. They weren't the weapons that Zhang Xiaohua was expecting. She casually picked up a square token that was about the size of a token. Zhang Xiaohua took a closer look and saw that this square token was engraved with strange patterns. When she touched it with her hand, she felt a strange feeling. As for how strange it was, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't explain it clearly. She only felt that it was different from usual. What is this? Zhang Xiaohua pinched her chin and thought hard. Forget it. It's just junk that someone threw away. It probably isn't anything good. Zhang Xiaohua then threw it on the ground. The token fell to the ground and made a sound that was neither metal nor wood, causing Zhang Xiaohua's heart to skip a beat. This seems to be something good. Zhang Xiaohua was a little hesitant. Finally, with a wave of her hand, she swept away all the junk that the Heavenly Hall disciple had thrown into the corner and put them all into her belt. Since I've entered Heaven Pavilion, how can I leave empty-handed? This was the reason Zhang Xiaohua comforted herself. Heaven Pavilion also had 10 levels. At the 9th level, the weapons that were comparable to Zhang Xiaohua's jade water sword. Unfortunately, the higher she went, the fewer the weapons there were. If Zhang Xiaohua got greedy and casually took one of them away, although it wouldn't be discovered at the time, it would definitely be noticed when the inventory was checked in the future. I can't take advantage of others. Even if others can't find anything wrong with me, I can't give others a reason to suspect me. This was the mindset that Zhang Xiaohua had always adhered to. Hence, she only thought for a moment before returning to the Earth Pavilion from Heaven Pavilion. Should I make a trip to the Human Pavilion? Zhang Xiaohua thought to herself. There isn't anything good in the Earth Pavilion and Heaven Pavilion. Will the Human Pavilion have anything good? -4. Chapter 8:27. Zhang Xiaohua did not find anything good in the Heaven and Earth Pavilions, but he still did not give up. He cast a spell and teleported to the most ordinary Human Pavilion. Sure enough, the Human Pavilion was several times larger than the Earth Pavilion. The first floor alone was hundreds of feet wide, and the weapons on the first floor of the Human Pavilion were even more complicated. Many uncommon weapons were placed on the shelves. Zhang Xiaohua looked at a crescent spade and was stunned. Who in the Jianghu would use this? This should be used by the generals in battle. This Human Pavilion is not a weapon used by the masters of the Jianghu. Maybe it's a collection of all weapons. Understanding that the masters of the Jianghu would not choose weapons from the first floor, Zhang Xiaohua went straight to the second floor. Unfortunately, he was unlucky. Just like the Heaven and Earth Pavilions, Zhang Xiaohua released his divine sense, and his eyes lit up. From the second floor to the 10th floor, he still did not find anything. How can this be? Zhang Xiaohua was anxious, but carefully recalled what he saw just now. Only a few weapons on the top floor of the Heaven Pavilion were worth him taking. But if he really took them, it would definitely cause a huge uproar. As for the other weapons, they did not pique his interest at all. Walking to the first floor, Zhang Xiaohua looked at the huge floor and smiled bitterly. This place is so big and there are so many weapons. Is there not a single one that I like? Just as he was thinking, he suddenly thought, I didn't look at the first floor and went straight to the second floor. But if there's nothing good on the second floor, will there be anything on the first floor? But then he remembered that the Heaven and Earth Pavilion disciples thought the things on the first floor were the most useless. Even if they were thrown away, no one would pick them up. But this was only the judgment of the Heaven and Earth Pavilion disciples. They might not be all right. So, Zhang Xiaohua did not think about anything else. He released his divine sense and carefully searched the first floor of the Human Pavilion. Needless to say, Zhang Xiaohua's luck was finally on point. In the first level of the Human Pavilion, he actually found 3 things that had fluctuations of vitality. One was a small shield the size of a palm, another was a small mirror with 8 edges, and the last was a bracelet with 36 beads. These 3 items were very small and seemed to be children's toys. They were casually thrown under different shelves and were all covered in dust. At a glance, it was obvious that they had been neglected for many years. Zhang Xiaohua grinned and laughed foolishly. He sighed at his own luck as he placed the 3 items back into the pouch. However, to his surprise, the small shield and mirror were easily put away. When he tried to put away the bracelet, he couldn't put it away. The belt that could store items last time couldn't be put into this pouch. Could it be that this bracelet can also store items? Before he could use his divine sense to check, he heard someone shouting outside, "Junior Brotherin, it's almost time. Hurry up and come out. Otherwise..." Even if you find a good weapon, it will be confiscated by the enforcement disciples. Io, 2 hours have already passed? Zhang Xiaohua thought to himself, that's fast. Then, without thinking, he put the bracelet into his arms and immediately returned to the Earth Pavilion. He casually picked up a long sword from the shelf and ran out of the Earth Pavilion without looking at it. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua come out with a long sword, Zheng Yi went up to him and looked at the sword from top to bottom. He smiled and said, Junior Brotherin really has good taste. This long sword is one of the best weapons on the first floor of the Earth Pavilion. Then he also asked in confusion, Junior Brotherin, there seem to be a few swords on the second floor that are even better than this one. Why didn't you pick those? Zhang Xiaohua giggled and said, I've never seen so many weapons before. I was fascinated the moment I entered. I picked left and right, reluctant to part with any of them. When senior brother Zheng called me, I was only halfway there and had yet to see many weapons. How would I have the time to go to the second floor? The flowers are so dazzling. Junior Brotherin, if I had known, I would have told you in advance. Zhang Yi said with a smile. Told you in advance? Zhang Xiaohua came to a realization again. Of course. There's another layer of meaning in his words. That is, if you give me a little more benefit, of course I will tell you. Zhang Xiaohua shook his head in his heart, but his face was full of regret. He only scratched his head and said, I say, if I had known, I would have asked senior brother Zheng more. Hee, as long as you are sincere, it will happen. Junior Brotherin is still not too sincere. Zhang Yi laughed and led Zhang Xiaohua out of the courtyard. When Zhang Xiaohua walked to the entrance of the courtyard, her heart suddenly jolted. She kept the small shield and mirror in her purse, but she kept the bracelet in her bosom. Furthermore, she still had little black and little yellow in her bosom. When she came out of the heaven, earth, and mortal treasure pavilions, the people from the Universal Hall would definitely inspect her. Wouldn't they be able to find out if they inspected her? What should I do? Zhang Xiaohua was at her wit's end. It was too late to do anything now. I can't just kill him to silence him, right? Zhang Xiaohua thought to herself. Even if I kill him, the supervisor from the Universal Hall will know that it was Ren Xiaoyao from the Pill Expansion Hall who did it. With that thought, Zheng Yi brought Zhang Xiaohua to a small house at the side of the courtyard. When they arrived at the small house, Zheng Yi turned around and smiled at Zhang Xiaohua. Junior brother Rin, don't be anxious. Once you register here, this weapon will be yours. And all right. Thank you, senior brother Zheng, for leading the way. As she spoke, Zhang Xiaohua wanted to stuff the other bottle of blood replenishing pills into Zhang Yi's hands. However, after thinking about it, wouldn't that be revealing 300 taels of silver here? It would be obvious that she took too many things or that the weapon was taken from the second floor or above. Furthermore, how could this broken sword be worth 2 bottles of blood replenishing pills? Just as she was thinking, the two of them entered the house and saw a disciple sitting behind a long table. When he saw Zhang Yi enter, he smiled and said, Io, junior brother Zheng, you haven't been here for a long time? Isn't that so? I also thought that after the Orchid Dusk refinement, there would be many disciples coming over, and I would also be able to visit senior brother. In the end, the two of them chatted leisurely. After a long while, just as Zhang Xiaohua was getting impatient, the disciple pointed at Zhang Xiaohua and said, Junior brother Zheng, this disciple. Io, look at my brain. I forgot that this is a disciple from the Pill Expansion Hall. This is the disciple who took our Universal Hall's token and came to the Earth Pavilion to collect a weapon. All right, then I have to register. Oh, which floor did this disciple go to? When the senior brother heard that it was official business, he didn't dare to delay and quickly took out a brush and ink to record. He opened an antique booklet and smiled at Zhang Xiaohua. Junior brother, what is your name? Which floor did you take what weapon from? Zhang Xiaohua cupped her hands and said, I am Rin Xiaoyao from the Pill Expansion Hall. I took this sword from the first floor of the Earth Pavilion. First floor? The disciple was clearly stunned. He looked at Zheng Yi and asked, Didn't junior brother Zhang say that you could go to the second floor? Zhang Xiaohua was still scratching her head. I didn't have time to go to the second floor before I was called out by senior brother Zhang. The senior brother looked at Zhang Yi again and smiled thoughtfully. He let Zhang Xiaohua take the sword and looked at it carefully. He said, "There are too many weapons on the first floor of the Earth Pavilion. Although I don't know where you took it from, looking at the weapon's quality, it must be on the first floor without a doubt. Junior brother Rin, you are still too honest." This, Zhang Xiaohua's face was honest. She smiled and said, "Next time, I will go directly to the second floor." "You still want to have a second time?" The disciple almost laughed involuntarily. Even the tip of the brush that was prepared to record had a few drops of ink dripping down. The senior brother wrote something in the book and put it down after writing a few strokes. He said, "Okay, junior brother Rin, I hope to meet you again." Although he said that, it sounded like he was just being polite. He didn't expect Zhang Xiaohua to come back at all. "That's it," Zhang Xiaohua said casually with a face full of disbelief. She panicked as soon as she said that. Wasn't she just asking for trouble? Was she reminding him? Yeah. The disciple was also stunned. He smiled and said, "You can only enter the treasure pavilion for 2 hours. Of course, that's it." Then he said, "The Earth Pavilion and the Human Pavilion only have registration, so it doesn't take much time. It's different from the Heaven Pavilion, where you have to be searched, which takes a longer time." "Oh no, senior brother. What I mean is, there's no mark on this long sword, and you didn't ask me where I got it. How? How are you going to record it?" "Ha ha ha!" The disciple laughed and said, "Junior brother Rin is really interesting. Didn't I say just now that there are too many weapons on the first floor of the Earth Pavilion? The quality, they're not the best. They're just ordinary. How can I remember where the weapons are? I'll just write that Pill Expansion Hall disciple Ren Xiaoyao got a long sword from the first floor of the Earth Pavilion. What else do you think I can record? Besides, this is the Earth Pavilion. You don't know that in the Human Pavilion there are all kinds of strange weapons. There are more than 10 times more weapons than in the Earth Pavilion. It's even more impossible for me to remember. So of course I won't record it in detail. Only Tienga would follow junior Marshal Brother Ren's instructions and see where it is and what kind of weapon it is. I hope junior Brother Ren can bring a keepsake for entering the Heaven Pavilion next time. I'll secretly tell you which weapon is the best." Zhang Xiaohua didn't think much of the senior brother's teasing. She nodded and said, "Senior brother, what's your name? I'll definitely look for you the next time I come." The senior brother was stunned. He looked at Zhang Yi and smiled. "My surname is Jia. If junior brother Rin comes next time, you can look for me." "All right, senior brother Jia, I'll bring this disciple out. I'll come back when I have the chance." Zhang Yi cupped his hands at senior brother Jia and walked out with Zhang Xiaohua. After sending Zhang Xiaohua to the mountainside, Zhang Yi returned the Pill Expansion Hall token to her and said with a smile, "Our Universe Hall will be taking back that keepsake. I hope junior brother Rin can bring a new keepsake next time." "Thank you, senior brother Zhang." Zhang Xiaohua cupped her hands and bowed. "See you next time." All right. See you next time." Zhang Yi smiled and returned the greeting before turning around and leaving. Come, there are more chapters. -4. Chapter 828. Zhang Xiaohua called out to Huan Huan from a nearby tree. She floated up and slowly descended the floating mound peak. When she reached a lush forest, she released her divine sense and listened carefully. After confirming that there was no one around, she patted Huan Huan's bald head and walked diagonally out of the mountain path into the woods. Zhang Xiaohua got down from the deer and rubbed Huan Huan's head. She didn't care if Huan Huan understood her and muttered, "Huan Huan, stay here. I'll go up and take a look. I'll be back in a while." Huan Huan seemed to understand. It walked under the tree and lowered its head to nibble on the grass. Zhang Xiaohua looked at the courtyard in the distance and said with a smile, "Senior brother Jia, I'm back. However, I'm not looking for you." I bet you won't be able to think of this treasure even if you crack your head." As he spoke, he twisted his body and cast a spell, heading straight for the top of the floating mound peak. Needless to say, even after obtaining 3 treasures, he was still thinking about the 8 trigrams purple gold furnace on the top of the floating mound peak. However, when Zhang Xiaohua arrived at the top of the floating mound peak, she was stunned on the spot. In front of Zhang Xiaohua's eyes, the floating mound peak didn't look like the Tianmu peak that was planted with medicinal herbs, the Baiwa peak that was filled with dungeons, and the Shixin peak that was barren. This place was actually a beautiful courtyard. What the hell is going on? Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but ask curiously. The scenery at the top of the floating mound peak couldn't be compared to the Shixin peak. The trees weren't lush, and other than the flat courtyard, the surroundings were filled with brown stones. It was a mess and didn't look as beautiful as the courtyards at the waist of the mountain. Which idiot actually thought of building a house here? Even our Guozhuang house wouldn't build a house on the top of a hill. Zhang Xiaohua curled her lips, but didn't approach. She jumped onto the crown of a large tree and looked in the direction of the Lingering Fragrance Peak. The Lingering Fragrance Peak was located to the south of the floating mound peak. Right now, the sun was shining brightly in the sky. As the fiery sunlight shone on the sea of clouds, it was like a scene of golden snakes dancing wildly. Zhang Xiaohua narrowed her eyes and observed for a long while. She made a rough estimation in her heart. Then, she made a hand seal and escaped into the ground. Based on her experience at Shixin Peak and Tianmu Peak, the 8 trigrams purple gold furnace of Fuqiu Peak should be in the cliff-facing Lingering Fragrance Peak, just as Zhang Xiaohua had expected, even though the pill chamber of Fuqiu Peak wasn't as big as the one at Shixin Peak. Zhang Xiaohua had put in a lot of effort. After a careful search, she easily found it. Moreover, there was indeed a rather large 8 trigrams purple gold furnace in the pill chamber. Zhang Xiaohua released his divine sense and examined it. Needless to say, it was exactly the same as the pill furnaces she had found at Tianmu Peak and Shixin Peak. Looking at the 8 trigrams purple gold furnace in front of her, Zhang Xiaohua was really stunned. Previously, he had thought of the possibility that there would be an 8 trigrams purple gold furnace at the peak of every mountain. However, that was just a bold imagination. Even when he came to the floating mound peak to look for the 8 trigrams purple gold furnace, he still felt that it was absurd. There's a pill furnace at the peak of every mountain. What kind of concept was that? There were a total of 19 8 trigrams purple gold furnaces. The 2 pill furnaces at Tianmu Peak and Shixin Peak could be called male and female pill furnaces by Zhang Xiaohua. How could these 19 8 trigrams purple gold furnaces be differentiated? What are these 19 8 trigrams purple gold furnaces used for? Don't tell me that these 19 pill furnaces live together to refine pills? Ha! If that's the case, their imposing manner is really frightening. Zhang Xiaohua muttered to himself. He only had a few small and stingy weapons in his hands now, such as the dragon binding hoop and sigh. There really wasn't much to compare. Therefore, even though these 8 trigrams purple gold furnaces were only pill furnaces for refining pills, Zhang Xiaohua really liked the physique of these pill furnaces. At least they look better than those little shields and mirrors I got earlier. Therefore, based on this reason, Zhang Xiaohua had already made up his mind. No matter what these 19 8 trigrams purple gold furnaces were used for, he would find a way to keep them in his bag. He would keep them in his belt. Anyway, he had already used some of the medicinal herbs in his belt, so there was a lot of empty space. It was just right to keep these pill furnaces. Zhang Xiaohua carefully read the incantation for refining this 8 trigrams purple gold furnace. Indeed, it was the same as the previous 2 furnaces. Without any hesitation, he began to refine it. Even though refining this 8 trigrams purple gold furnace consumed a lot of vital energy, Zhang Xiaohua, who had improved after comprehending the heavenly Tao a few times, did not expend too much energy to refine the pill furnaces. Just like before, his vital energy did not spurt out. He just kept the pill furnaces in his belt. Within the belt, the 3 8-trigrams purple gold furnaces were placed together in a triangular formation. Even though they did not touch each other directly, there was an indescribable connection that kept them together. After keeping the pill furnaces, Zhang Xiaohua took a look around the small pill room. This pill room was rather small, and after placing the 8-trigrams purple gold furnaces, there was not much space. There was also a long, narrow table by the side, but it was empty. Seeing that there were no more benefits, Zhang Xiaohua smiled and turned around to leave. She directly returned to Huanhuan's side. 2 days later, on the wide mountain path leading to Lingering Fragrance Peak, Zhang Xiaohua sat cross-legged on the back of the 4 odd beasts with her eyes tightly shut. She walked leisurely. It had been 9 days since Messenger Mu from Lingering Fragrance Peak went to Shirxin Peak to pass on the decree of the sect leader. If it was any other disciple who would not have rushed to Lingering Fragrance Peak after obtaining such benefits, Zhang Xiaohua, on the other hand, used a few days to refine the last batch of pills for Zhang Xiaohu. After that, she took a detour to Floating Mound Peak. Not only did she obtain some benefits from the treasury, she also went to the peak to retrieve the hidden pill furnaces. Only then did she hurry to Lingering Fragrance Peak. What is this bracelet with 36 beads? Zhang Xiaohua was having a hard time. He held the bracelet with his eyes closed and stroked each bead in his hand. The beads on the bracelet were very exquisite. When one looked at them carefully, they could see the engravings of birds, insects, and fish. However, when one touched them with their fingers, there was no trace of the engravings. It was as though the engravings were in the middle of the beads. Zhang Xiaohua knew that this was a magic tool similar to a belt. However, when he sent his divine sense into it, he could only feel a trace of energy fluctuation. When he went deeper, he could not find any abnormalities. It was different from the dragon binding bracelet of the past. The dragon binding bracelet of the past was only because Zhang Xiaohua's cultivation was not enough to break the restriction on it. Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense was blocked by the restriction. Once it entered, it was bounced back. However, other than the trace of energy fluctuation, this bead was no different from an ordinary bead. When one's divine sense swept past it, there was no reaction at all. If it was not for the faint energy fluctuation on each bead and the slight fluctuation on the string connecting the beads, Zhang Xiaohua would have thought that this was just an ordinary bracelet. Let's wait for the right opportunity, Zhang Xiaohua said in his heart. It's still the same sentence. Time is the answer to all questions. Casually putting on the bracelet on his right wrist, Zhang Xiaohua took out the small shield from his money bag. This was an antique item. The front and back of the small shield were engraved with strange patterns. These patterns were extremely exquisite, and each pattern seemed to be able to move. When placed together, one could feel a sense of desolation. Furthermore, although these patterns were all over the small shield, Zhang Xiaohua felt that these patterns were strangely connected. All the patterns were connected, and not a single one of them could be missing. Of course, this shield was the same as the dragon binding bracelet. When one's divine sense wrapped around it, it bounced back and could not penetrate it. Zhang Xiaohua had found a time to carefully infiltrate it. Although Zhang Xiaohua had some confidence in breaking the outer restriction, when the divine sense in his Naiwen palace and the vital energy in his meridians leaked out like floodwaters, Zhang Xiaohua immediately dismissed the idea of breaking the restriction. What a joke! He had only opened the restriction a little, and his vital energy and divine sense already felt insufficient. If he wanted to break the restriction completely, how much vital energy would he need? The current Zhang Xiaohua definitely did not have the ability to do so. Zhang Xiaohua muttered to himself, nice to look at but useless, like a local tycoon who was counting his wealth. He took out the small mirror again. This was an octagonal bronze mirror. The extremely smooth surface of the mirror reflected Zhang Xiaohua's small eyes sunken nose, and small slaps. This mirror was no different from the mirrors used by ordinary people. The only difference was that ordinary people's mirrors were flat and round, but this mirror was octagonal. What made Zhang Xiaohua the most curious was that when Zhang Xiaohua first obtained this small mirror in the human pavilion, it clearly emitted faint and rhythmic waves. However, when Zhang Xiaohua took it out again at night to refine it, this mirror did not even emit the slightest ripple. Wherever Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense passed, there was really no difference from an ordinary object. Also, this mirror was not as good as the shield. Shields had mysterious patterns, but this mirror was abnormally smooth. When he touched it with his hand and looked at it with his eyes, he felt nothing. Even when he injected vital energy, there was no reaction at all. Could it be that I was mistaken? This was what Zhang Xiaohua had been nagging for the past few days. With that thought in mind, Zhang Xiaohua tossed the unresponsive mirror into the air. She caught it and smiled. Forget it. This Xiaoxia is handsome and unrestrained. I lack a mirror anyway. I will treat you as a daily necessity. But when Zhang Xiaohua tossed the mirror into the air, sunlight shone on the clean surface of the mirror. Immediately, an almost invisible brilliance was reflected from the mirror, directly shooting towards the mountain peak in front of them. -4. Chapter 829. Zhang Xiaohua tossed the small mirror that was infused with qi into the sky. Coincidentally, a ray of sunlight shone on the surface of the small mirror. Immediately, another ray of light appeared on the surface of the mirror. Following the ray of light that was reflected by the mirror, it shot straight toward the mountain peak in the distance. However, the refraction of the ray of light was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, Zhang Xiaohua was tossing the small mirror in her hand and complaining to the heavens. How could she see it? After she caught the small mirror, she kept it in her bosom. Just as she was about to pat Huan's horn to speed it up, she heard the sound of horse hooves in front of her. When Zhang Xiaohua raised her head and was about to take a closer look, a cloud of dust rose from the spacious mountain path in the distance. In a moment, she heard the sound of horse hooves approaching. Io! Looking at the arrogant horse that was charging straight toward them, Zhang Xiaohua quickly patted Huan's head. The four odd beasts were extremely unwilling to give way to the center of the mountain path. Rushing toward them were more than 10 pure black horses. They were the same horses that Chen Chen from Lingering Fragrance Peak and Zhang Xiaohua saw Envoy Mu from before. Only this time, the horses were not female inner court disciples like Qin Qin or Envoy Mu. Instead, there were more than 10 male disciples on the horses. Leading the group was a young disciple with an extremely pale face, starry eyes, thick eyebrows, and a high-nose bridge. He was actually much more handsome than Zhang Xiaohua. At this time, they were already very close to Lingering Fragrance Peak. The mountain path under their feet was several times wider than Tianmu Peak and Shixin Peak. The young disciple was galloping happily when he suddenly saw the people in front of him. However, even though he was surprised, he only glanced at them from the corner of his eyes before urging his horse to gallop past Zhang Xiaohua. The black horse under the young disciple had the same attitude as the young disciple. Its head was also raised high. When it galloped past Huan, it did not forget to raise its front hooves and neighed twice, as if it was scolding Huan for being too late and almost colliding with it. Huan did not have the same temperament as Zhang Xiaohua and was already impatient. It raised its hooves and neighed a few times. This sound was like metal and stone that resounded in the air. The black horse merely trembled, but its 4 legs did not go soft. It continued to gallop forward. However, the young disciple on the horse was taken aback. He turned his head and stared at Huan. Nay, the young disciple pulled the reins and stopped the black horse. Then he jumped down from the horse and used his movement skill to gallop in front of Zhang Xiaohua. This is bad. Look at this guy. He looks like he's going to cause trouble. Zhang Xiaohua frowned slightly as she thought to herself. Of course, when the young disciple stopped his horse, the dozen people behind him also stopped. However, They did not approach, and only sat on their horses and watched from afar. The young disciple walked in front of Zhang Xiaohua and widened his eyes. He looked at Huan Huan from top to bottom and from front to back. Needless to say, Zhang Xiaohua felt extremely uncomfortable. Even Huan Huan herself took a few steps back. Her face was filled with vigilance as she stared at the young disciple. The more the disciple looked at Huan Huan, the happier he became. When he saw Huan Huan's vigilant gaze, his joy turned into surprise. He then cupped his hands and asked, "Junior brother, is this David's deer mount?" When Zhang Xiaohua saw this, she was too embarrassed to continue sitting on Huan Huan's back. She jumped down and returned the greeting. "Yes, it is my mount. May I know what Brother Tai wants from me?" The price is negotiable." He turned around and called out to a disciple in the distance, "Junior brother Yang, bring my bag over and give a bottle of spirit-suppressing pill to this junior brother." When junior brother Yang heard this, he rode his horse over and took out a jade bottle from the bag on his saddle. He handed it over to Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua had a smile on her face. She looked at the spirit-suppressing pill in front of her and had no intention of reaching out to take it. The young disciple did not find it strange and did not even frown. He continued, "It seems that junior brother's appetite is not small. However, who asked me to take a fancy to this David's deer? Junior brother Yang, give him a bottle of Yuhuandan pill and a bottle of bone congealing pill." When junior brother Yang heard this, he unconsciously said, "Senior brother Yu, this beast is not worth this price." Senior brother Yu raised his eyes to look at junior brother Yang, then at Zhang Xiaohua, grinning from ear to ear as he said, "These 4 odd beasts are very rare in our fragrant religion. I don't know where this junior brother obtained them, but there's no need to think about it. They must be this junior brother's treasures. If we don't give out enough pills, what can he possibly do? Don't you think so, junior brother?" Senior brother Yu smiled at Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua was speechless. Although this senior brother Yu was very polite and had given a lot of pills, he didn't even ask for Zhang Xiaohua's name. He didn't even listen to Zhang Xiaohua's opinion. It was as if he was very certain that Zhang Xiaohua would give him the David's deer. This kind of domineering attitude was something Zhang Xiaohua had never seen before. Even Lu Zhen, the bully who snatched someone's medicinal paste formula, couldn't compare to him. Seeing that senior brother Yu was speaking to her directly, Zhang Xiaohua could only cup her hands and say, "Senior brother Yu, you're right. This David's deer is this one's treasure. It has been with this one for many years, so this one has no intention of giving it away." Senior brother Yu's face changed slightly when he heard this, but he quickly regained his sunny temperament. Junior brother Yang, who had handed over the jade bottle, raised it in the air awkwardly. At this moment, another horse ran out from the group of people and roared angrily, "You brat, which hall's disciple are you from? Can't you see that we are the inner disciples of Lingering Fragrance Peak? This person in front of you is Lingering Fragrance Peak's famous senior brother Yu Shuichuan. Don't tell me you want to go against the orders of an inner disciple? Junior brother Feng?" Senior brother Yu was a little unhappy when he heard this. He stopped him and said, "We are inner disciples and should be the role models of these ordinary disciples. You will scare this junior brother if you speak so loudly. I think that maybe this junior brother didn't notice our clothes just now, so he rejected us without thinking. When he has time, he will think about it carefully. He will definitely understand and transfer the 4 odd beasts to us." As he spoke, a smile appeared on his handsome face as he smiled at Zhang Xiaohua. Gosh, no matter how ignorant Zhang Xiaohua was, he could understand the meaning behind these words. However, he was not moved and said indifferently, "Thank you for your reminder, senior brother Yu. As the saying goes, a gentleman does not take what is good for him. These David's deer are my favorite item. I hope, senior brother, you can understand. You." In the end, senior brother Yu couldn't take it anymore. He frowned and almost scolded him. But then he smiled and said, "Does junior brother still think that there aren't enough pills? How about I add another Yuhuandan pill?" Zhang Xiaohua still shook his head. I think, senior brother, you has misheard. I have no intention of giving the David's deer to you. No matter how many pills there are, I will not exchange them. That brat you. The disciple at the side was about to fly into a rage again. Senior brother, you angrily said, Junior brother Feng, shut up. Then he smiled at Zhang Xiaohua and said, Well, since junior brother is not willing to give the David's deer to me, as your senior brother, I will not force you. Oh, I was too reckless. After saying so much, I still haven't asked for junior brother's name and which hall you are from. Zhang Xiaohua cupped his hands and said, I am Rin Xiaoyao, an inner disciple in preparation for alchemy. Inner disciple in preparation for alchemy? Preparation? Senior brother Yu was a little dumbfounded and said, Are you going to Lingering Fragrance Peak? Zhang Xiaohua said curiously, Yes, I am going to Lingering Fragrance Peak. At this time, junior brother Feng laughed again. That brat Yu, I don't know how he came up with this lie. Since when did my Lingering Fragrance Peak have a preparation for alchemy? I have only heard of inner disciple in preparation for alchemy, but I have never heard of inner disciple in preparation for alchemy. Junior brother Yang and the dozen people behind him laughed, as though they saw a sheep in wolf skin suddenly barging into a pack of wolves. Even senior brother Yu laughed and said, Junior brother Rin, if you mention other identities, the senior brothers here might be a little unfamiliar with you. But when he said this, his face suddenly changed and a gloomy expression flashed across his face. Then he laughed and said, I remember now. A few days ago, Junior's sister Zhang, who is in charge of alchemy, seemed to have asked her master to say something to the sect leader. She said that she wanted to recruit an inner disciple in alchemy. Could it be you? When Zhang Xiaohua saw senior brother Yu's expression, he was shocked by his intelligence. Senior brother Yu's position in the Lingering Fragrance Peak was definitely not a small matter. Hence he smiled and said, I don't know what senior brother Yu is talking about. I only rushed to the Lingering Fragrance Peak after receiving the order from the sect master. As for the inner sect disciple preparing to refine pills, this is the first time I've heard of it. At this moment, senior brother Yu narrowed his eyes and looked at Zhang Xiaohua from head to toe, just like how he looked at Huan Huan earlier. The corners of his eyes twitched a little as he smiled and said, I heard that senior's sister Mu also went out 2 days ago. I think it's true. Then he stopped talking about the 4 odd beasts and mounted his horse. He cupped his hands and said, Junior brother Rin, an inner disciple in preparation for alchemy. You're not an official alchemy disciple yet. I wish, junior brother Rin, that you can become an inner disciple in Lingering Fragrance Peak as soon as possible. Zhang Xiaohua was still standing on the ground. She cupped her hands in greeting and said, Thank you for your kind words, senior martial brother Yu. All right, junior brother Rin, please continue on your journey. We still have other matters to attend to. Once I return to Lingering Fragrance Peak, I will speak to junior brother Rin. After saying that, everyone patted their horses and continued along the mountain path, leaving a trail of dust behind them. Zhang Xiaohua stood at the side of the road. Seeing that the disciples had gone far away, she injured the David's deer and continued to walk forward. After walking quite a distance, junior brother Yang approached senior brother Yu and said with a smile, Zhang Pinger has been busy for several months, so it was for such an ordinary kid. Senior brother Yu, this Rin Xiaoyao is far inferior to you. I wonder if Zhang Pinger... -4. Chapter 830. Knowing that Zhang Xiaohua wouldn't be able to hear them, junior brother Yang asked in a low voice, Senior brother Yu, this looks like an ordinary disciple. Could it be that Zhang Pinger was running around looking for her master, and some elders who were friends with her master? Yu Zhuqiuan looked at the people around him and said in a low voice, That should be right. Previously, Zhang Pinger was injured and I visited her several times, but I was refused at the door. Later, when I heard that she had recovered, I went to see her again. Unfortunately, I met her on the mountain path and saw that she was in a hurry. When I asked her what she was busy with, she didn't say. However, looking at her expression, she was very different from before the Valley Orchid dusk refinement. Different? Junior brother Yang frowned and said, from senior brother Yu's tone, it seems that you have some confidence. Why are there more variables? Isn't that so? Yu Zhuqiuan rolled his eyes and saw that although the other disciples were beside him, they were far away and didn't pay attention to his conversation with junior martial brother Yang. He said, before the orchid dusk refinement, although Zhang Pinger still refused, she had already changed her previous silence. If there were some opportunities, we could still make her happy. I know that her master was seriously ill, so I found a few spirit grasses for her. From time to time, I could also hear her call out, Senior Martial Brother Yu. But after the orchid dusk refinement, it was as if she had changed into another person. She was even worse than before. Alas, if I had known earlier. When junior brother Yang heard this, a smile appeared on his face, and he asked, if I had known earlier, what would I have done? Yu Zhuqiuan looked around and said with a smile, before the Valley Orchid Dusk refinement, Zhang Pinger was a little hurt. Moreover, with her martial arts, it would be dangerous for her to go to the Valley Orchid Dusk refinement. At that time, she was also a little emotional. If I didn't have some misgivings that day, I would have already. Alas, that would have been great. Junior brother Yang comforted him. Perhaps senior brother Yu is too suspicious. The joy between a man and a woman is most important in the process. I think senior brother Yu is also an expert in this field. Otherwise, you would have already succeeded several months ago. But if that's the case, Zhang Pinger would have a trace of regret and resent senior brother Yu. Then, senior brother Yu's plans, Yu Zhuqiuan, seemed to be very familiar with this junior brother Yang and didn't try to avoid him, a smile hanging on her lips as she said, Junior brother Yang really understands me. If I really cause trouble for no reason, not only will my future days be difficult, but if Sir Religion Master learns of this, do you think I'll still be alive? Junior brother Yang nodded again and said, Senior brother Yu's words are very reasonable. However, the disciple we met just now didn't look very handsome. He was just an ordinary person. Just based on his appearance, he wasn't senior brother Yu's opponent, let alone in terms of martial arts. If Zhang Pinger really had any other thoughts, it wouldn't be on this guy. Junior brother Yang wasn't the person involved. Of course, he didn't know how Yu Zhuqiuan felt. He simply excluded Zhang Xiaohua. Yu Zhuqiuan, on the other hand, had a different premonition. He said, thoughtfully, that's not necessarily the case. Haven't you heard of the ancient saying, the more a tortoise looks at a mung bean, the more it likes it? I think there's something wrong with this kid. It had to be said that this guy's perception of love rivals was really sharp. However, junior brother Yang was dismissive. Forget it. What kind of reputation do you, Yu Zhuqiuan, have among the inner disciples of Lingering Fragrance Peak? Just based on your appearance, your martial arts, and your... Then he covered it up. He's just an inner disciple of alchemy. How can he be compared to you? Bullshit. What inner disciple of alchemy? He's just a preparatory alchemy disciple. The incomparably refined Yu Zhuqiuan actually swore. It could be seen that this guy was very wary of Zhang Xiaohua. He said, disdainfully, I've never heard of a preparatory alchemy disciple. He's even worse than an ordinary alchemy disciple. However, a look of interest immediately appeared on his face. He laughed softly and said, This Zhang Pinger's master is really good. He actually managed to convince the hierarch to make an exception and get a disciple who is in charge of alchemy. Tell me, how can I not be interested? That's right. I've never heard of it either. I only know that outer disciples are fighting to become inner disciples. I've never thought that there would be an alchemy disciple as a preparatory alchemy disciple. Yu Zhuqiuan's eyes flashed. He said, It can be seen that this Ren Xiaoyao can make Zhang Pinger put in so much effort. You say, how can I not be wary of him? That's right. Junior brother Yang seemed to have realized something. He nodded and said, An inner disciple of alchemy is just an alchemy disciple. But isn't he still an inner disciple? In name, he's not worse than us. It seems something interesting must have happened in the Yulon Grand Canyon. Senior brother Yu, do you think your Zhang Pinger has already? Yu Zhuichuan's handsome face instantly revealed a trace of malevolence. Soon after, it disappeared. He laughed softly and said, I see that Zhang Pinger is still a virgin. How could she have done what you think? Moreover, she was seriously injured in the Yulon Grand Canyon. How could she have done such dirty things? Bah! Junior brother Yang laughed and said, If you did it, then it's a romantic affair. If others did it, then it's a filthy affair. Don't you feel embarrassed? Yu Zhuichuan didn't pay attention to his ridicule. He only laughed and said, No matter what kind of relationship this guy has with my Zhang Pinger, I'll strangle this uncontrollable thing in the cradle. Isn't it just a preparatory alchemy disciple? Can't I just prevent this preparatory alchemy disciple from becoming an official disciple? Prevent him from becoming an official disciple? Junior brother Yang stared blankly for a moment before he understood. He pointed at Yu Zhuichuan and said, Senior brother Yu, it is really calculating. Since Zhang Pinger fought for this Ren Xiaoyao to become a preparatory alchemy disciple, then there must be a process before he can become an alchemy disciple. Senior brother, you only needs to do some tricks during this period. Presumably, this Ren Xiaoyao will obediently roll back to where he came from. You're too kind. I'm just representing Sir Sect leader to test this guy and see if he has the qualifications to become an inner disciple. Yu Zhuichuan said very modestly. Ha ha ha. When junior brother Yang heard this, he immediately gave him a thumbs up and cheered. When the people around saw this, they were very puzzled and looked over. Yu Zhuichuan smiled and didn't say anything. He turned his head and looked in the direction he had just walked, as if he was challenging Zhang Xiaohua. Poor Zhang Xiaohua! How could he know that before he even set foot on Lingering Fragrance Peak, he had already been marked? Who knew how many shady methods were waiting for him? Just as Yu Zhuichuan turned his head to look, Zhang Xiaohua, who was riding on David's deer, didn't sneeze like the others. Instead, his heart moved, and he pinched his fingers to calculate. Cough, cough, he was wrong. He frowned and released his divine sense to look around. There was no movement. He couldn't help but wonder in his heart, is there something strange? It had to be said that although Zhang Xiaohua's way of karma was just a glimpse and didn't have any achievements, Yu Zhuichuan's heart moved and wanted to scheme against Zhang Xiaohua. He had already planted a cause there. As the cause, Zhang Xiaohua, who was in the cause, felt it in his heart. It was just that his cultivation was still shallow and he only knew that something was wrong. As for what it was, and who it was, he didn't know. Zhang Xiaohua looked for a moment and didn't find anything. He faintly felt that it was because he had comprehended the way of karma. However, when he thought about it, the inner disciple called Yu Zhuichuan just now was considered to be somewhat famous in Lingering Fragrance Peak. He just didn't want to give Huan away. He wouldn't bear a grudge because of this, right? However, since there was already a cause, there must be an effect. It was useless to worry about it for no reason. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohua withdrew his divine sense and continued to urge David's deer to go towards Lingering Fragrance Peak. Although Lingering Fragrance Peak was very close, it still took nearly a day's time to reach it. During this time, Zhang Xiaohua met many inner disciples again. However, these inner disciples were all led by female inner disciples. Although they were also riding on pure black horses, many of the people on the horses wore a veil on their heads, and their faces couldn't be seen. Zhang Xiaohua modestly stood aside, and no one harassed him like Yu Zhuichuan. In contrast to Zhang Xiaohua's leisure and contentment, at the foot of Lingering Fragrance Peak, a white-clothed lady was pacing back and forth in a corridor that was like a fairyland. Occasionally, she would extend her head to look at the end of the corridor. There was a small bridge and a neat bluestone path on the small bridge. When she saw that there was no one on the bluestone path, she used all her strength to look up the mountain path. When the mountain path was far away, she looked at the white fog that covered the mountain path. It was as though she wanted to see what she wanted to see from the white fog. That lady was Zhang Pinger, who Yu Zhuichuan and the others were talking about. Zhang Pinger's brows were tightly knitted together, and her fair face was filled with anxiety. Her cherry lips were slightly pouted to express her dissatisfaction. Zhang Pinger's pacing back and forth attracted the laughter of the people around her. Then a clear voice sounded from a small pavilion at the side of the corridor. "Senior Sister Zhang, do you want to rest for a while?" "Rest?" Zhang Pinger was stunned and said, "I'm not tired. Why do I need to rest?" "You still don't need to rest?" "Senior Marshal Sister Zhang, you've been like this since 3 days ago. You've been walking over and over again. Even the jade green trees in the corridor will be ground down by your feet. Hee, come to think of it, today is the 10th day. How could that Rin something be so unappreciative of others' kindness? Although he's only a preparatory alchemy disciple, he's still an inner disciple after all. It was my senior sister who went through untold hardships to get rid of him. Our senior sister was greatly indebted to Master. If she were to throw him away for no reason, it would really hurt our senior sister, Zhang's good intentions." "You're such a chatterbox." Zhang Pinger glared at the inside of the pavilion and said softly he was originally an unfathomable person. Perhaps he still doesn't want to come to Lingering Fragrance Peak? -4.